There was a hush in the great hall of the Red Keep on the day Tywin Lannister made a decision that would change the fate of the Seven Kingdoms. The windows were thrown open to admit the gentle warmth of a late spring day, yet every knight, lord, and servant within the vast chamber felt an uncharacteristic chill. Tywin stood beside the Iron Throne, its sharp edges and twisted swords towering behind him like a silent guardian of secrets. He did not sit. He would not profane that seat unless he claimed it outright or acted as regent by an unbreakable law. Yet all eyes were upon him, not upon the seat of kings. He had called them there without explanation, only that some matter of great import required their presence. What no one expected, what Tywin had not expected until mere days before, was the arrival of a new child beneath the banner of House Lannister. A child not of his blood, yet destined to shape the realm in ways that might overshadow all the wars and rebellions that had come before. When the guards opened the side doors, a woman entered with trembling steps. She wore plain linens, the hem caked with mud, as though she had traveled day and night without rest. In her arms was an infant wrapped in black and red. A hush deeper than any funeral procession fell across the hall. Some recognized the colors, saw the faint glimmer of silver-gold hair peeking from the child's tiny brow. Rumors were already swirling that something Targaryen had survived, an echo of the old dynasty that Robert Baratheon's war had sought to end forever. The infant was barely a few weeks old, but to eyes trained in courtly matters, each detail was monumental. The cloak itself spoke a memory of fire and blood. Tywin took the child and held him out for all to see. There was no quaver in his voice, no moment of doubt. "This boy," he said, "carries a name once feared, now nearly lost. He carries Targaryen blood. I have brought him to the Red Keep by lawful right, for House Lannister will adopt him. He shall be my ward, my son in all ways that matter, and I will see to it he is raised to know both his heritage and the responsibilities required of him." A murmur rippled among the gathered lords. Tywin's green eyes swept over them, pinning each to silent agreement. If anyone had dared object, they lost the will when his gaze settled upon them. He was the hand of the king, the mightiest lord in the realm in all but name. King Robert was away, off on a hunt with his brothers and a retinue of rowdy knights who found more comfort in the open fields than in the subtlety of court. In the king's absence, Tywin wielded unchallengeable authority in King's Landing. Yet the question on every lip lingered. Why? Why would Tywin Lannister, a man who prided himself on the strength and purity of his bloodline, adopt an infant of the family he had helped to overthrow? The war of the usurper had been won, House Targaryen shattered, and Robert Baratheon crowned. For Tywin to make such a move, to absorb the dragon's seed into the lion's den, either hinted at a quiet madness or a plan so grand no one had the sense to guess its shape. In the days that followed, word spread like wildfire throughout Westeros. Some claimed the child was a Targaryen pretender Tywin meant to keep as a hostage, lest the Targaryen loyalists abroad try to stir up rebellion again. Others whispered that this was no true Targaryen babe, merely a ploy to ensure the Lannisters had leverage against possible challengers to the throne. But none of that explained why Tywin showed such personal care, or why he had moved mountains behind closed doors to secure the king's grudging acceptance of the arrangement. None knew that in the privacy of his study, with only his brother Kevan as witness, Tywin had unveiled a letter bearing the sigil of House Targaryen, the wax seal broken, the message inside proclaiming that there was indeed a living heir, a child of a distant branch, born in secrecy to the exiled remains of the once great family. The letter had claimed the infant was the offspring of Daenerys Targaryen's rumored union with a man loyal to the old dynasty, hidden away to preserve the line. The child had arrived in Westeros in the arms of a wet nurse who braved storms and brigands to place him under Tywin's watch. Some nights, Tywin would sit alone in his chambers, staring at the baby as he slept in a gilded cradle, the Lion of Lannister embroidered upon the cloth. The child was small, helpless, yet even in that tiny face Tywin believed he glimpsed a hint of the old Valyrian features. The hair was so pale as to be almost white in certain lights. The baby's eyes, when they flickered open, seemed to shimmer a blue so pale it was nearly silver, though often they appeared a soft lilac. Tywin recognized the look. He remembered the Targaryens he had seen in his youth, how regal and aloof they had been. If this boy was indeed legitimate, and Tywin had ways to confirm such things, from the shape of his skull to the subtle lines of the eyes, then adopting him into House Lannister could be a step toward forging an alliance more unbreakable than any before it. Through this child, Tywin would hold both the Golden Lion and the Sleeping Dragon in his hand. He named the infant Aeron. The boy would keep the Targaryen name, for Tywin believed that to hide it would be foolish. Let the realm see that House Lannister had claimed a Targaryen heir. Let it echo across the seas, to whoever might be waiting for a chance to challenge Robert's reign. If the boy was the key to the realm's future, Tywin would not bury him in secrets. Better to raise him under the watchful eyes of allies and enemies alike. Under Tywin's guardianship, Aeron Targaryen Lannister would learn cunning, politics, warfare, and the subtle art of power. Perhaps the child would become a new piece on the game board, one that only Tywin could master. And if the child brought new dangers, well, Tywin was no stranger to dangers. He had faced them all his life, and time and again he had bent them to his will. As months passed, the Red Keep slowly adjusted to the presence of the new infant. Servants scurried about with plush blankets, carved toys in the shape of dragons, and small lion figurines that the child could grasp with his tiny fists. Maesters and septas saw to Aeron's health. On certain nights, Cersei Lannister, the queen, would visit her father's chambers to glimpse the boy. She came not out of affection but curiosity. She stared at the babe as if trying to see if there was a threat in his mere existence. Jaime was less interested. If he ever peered in at the child, it was only in passing, a brief flick of gold hair in the corridor as he made his way to his duties with the Kingsguard. Tyrion, on the other hand, sometimes stood by the cradle for long minutes, a strange smile on his lips. Perhaps the imp saw something of an outcast in the Targaryen babe. Perhaps he simply found it entertaining that his father had effectively brought a dragon under their roof. When King Robert returned from the hunt, drunk and full of stories of stags and boars, he found the Red Keep abuzz with the news. He confronted Tywin with incredulity. "You mean to keep a whelp of that cursed family here in my halls?" "My halls?" Robert demanded, face ruddy and fists clenched. "By the gods, Tywin, have you forgotten how many good men died to topple the dragons? My own foster father, my beloved ones. We shed blood to rid the realm of that line." Tywin listened with the stillness of an old lion. When Robert had raged enough to tire himself, Tywin said quietly, "We have not forgotten, nor have I, but this child is an orphan, and it benefits the realm if we keep him close, rather than let him wander across the sea, growing up among those who would thirst for vengeance. Under my roof, he is a harmless boy, with no illusions about who rules Westeros. Under someone else's roof, he might become a pretender, or a conqueror in the making." Robert cursed loudly, face contorting, but eventually he relented. He was a warrior, not a schemer. Tywin had presented the situation so plainly that even Robert could see that letting some rumored Targaryen heir slip away into Essos was foolish. Better to keep him near, watch him. Keep the realm's greatest spymasters and knights well aware of his every move. Robert might not trust Tywin fully, but in this matter the old lion had a point, and so it was done. Aeron Targaryen remained in the Red Keep, under the official guardianship of Tywin Lannister himself. The babe, only a few months old, could not possibly comprehend the swirl of politics that surrounded his cradle. Yet from that moment on, every choice Tywin made, every alliance he considered, carried an undercurrent of the dragon. It was a constant reminder that House Lannister now had an extraordinary piece in their game. As Aeron grew, still an infant in the early days but crawling about by the time he neared his first name day, Tywin realized how quickly the realm adjusted to new realities. Servants might whisper behind corners, but they continued to serve. Nobles would stare, but they still bent the knee in the king's presence. Life went on. Wars threatened in the distance, skirmishes with raiders, rebellions from leftover Targaryen loyalists. Whispers persisted of Daenerys Targaryen and her brother Viserys across the narrow sea, but few believed that any real threat lingered. After all, how many Targaryens could have survived? And how would they cross the sea with no ships, no armies, no gold? Years began to slip by. Aeron spoke his first words in the Lannister presence, toddling around the courtyard with a determined expression that reminded Tywin of a young lion cub more than a dragon. The name Targaryen remained a puzzle for the boy as he grew conscious of who he was. He'd tug on his nurse's sleeve, asking, "What is a Targaryen?" The nurse would reply, "Your father, Lord Tywin, will tell you in time." And it was Tywin who eventually sat him down in a small chamber lined with books, the walls illuminated by candles, to explain that he bore the name of a once great dynasty. He did so calmly, as though reciting a history lesson. He told the boy of Aegon the Conqueror, the dragons Balerion, Vhagar, and Meraxes. He spoke of the Mad King, of Rhaegar's defeat on the Trident, carefully omitting the more brutal truths. He spared the child the details of how the Lannister forces had sacked King's Landing, how Tywin himself had orchestrated the downfall of House Targaryen. Instead, he emphasized that times had changed, that the realm was now under King Robert, and that Aeron was under the protection of House Lannister. To be a Targaryen, Tywin said, his voice level, is to carry the blood of kings who once held dragons. It is to carry a legacy that stretches back to old Valyria. Many in the realm will look at you with suspicion. Some will hate you without cause. Others may revere you, but you must never forget who you are, nor who I have made you. Am I a Lannister too? The boy asked, small hands gripping the arms of the chair. He must have been 6 or 7 by then, with that white blonde hair that shone almost silver in the candlelight. Tywin nodded. Yes, in a way. You bear the lion's protection. You bear my name in the sense that you live under my roof and share my fortunes. You are Aeron Targaryen, but you are also my ward, my son by law, and one day you will appreciate what that means. Aeron peered at Tywin, absorbing each word with the solemnity of a child who had grown up surrounded by caution. He was bright. Tywin had known that from the start. The boy mastered reading and writing with ease. He took to the historical texts with an almost frightening hunger for knowledge. Some nights, the maesters would find him rummaging through scrolls and books, enthralled by tales of dragons, Targaryen kings, and the conquests of old. Meanwhile, Tywin shaped the boy's upbringing in every subtle way. He arranged for the best swordsmanship instructors. He had the child trained in manners, in politics, in the cunning arts of how to read a room, how to speak so that even your enemies might smile. The courtiers began to notice a new kind of presence in the keep. A boy who had the poise of a prince but wore the subtle emblem of a lion and dragon entwined on his doublet. Tywin had commissioned it. The golden lion of Lannister poised opposite the 3-headed dragon of Targaryen, fused in a single design. It was a bold statement that few could overlook. Some whispered that Tywin was weaving a plot to place Aeron on the Iron Throne should Robert falter. Others believed the boy was merely a means to control any Targaryen loyalists. Whatever the truth, Tywin never confirmed or denied, content to let the realm guess. Cersei kept her distance. She was queen, mother to Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen. Her time was consumed with ensuring that Joffrey stood poised to inherit the throne when Robert eventually drank or fought himself into the grave. Yet she'd sometimes watch Aeron from a distance, an unsettling calculation in her green eyes. Jaime, caught in his own complexities as a Kingsguard and the rumored father of Cersei's children, largely avoided the boy. Tyrion, though, occasionally exchanged words with Aeron, trading barbs and wit. Tyrion seemed intrigued by the boy's intelligence. Once or twice, Aeron was seen in the library with the imp, the two quietly disputing a point of history or the interpretation of an old text. The real measure of the change in the 7 Kingdoms became evident one winter day, when delegates from Dorne arrived to discuss a matter of trade and rumored bandits on the Stormlands border. They were led by a Dornish lord who had lost kin to the Targaryens of old, but also despised the Lannisters for the deaths of Elia Martell and her children. Finding a Targaryen ward under Tywin's roof must have felt like a betrayal of old grudges. Yet as they sat in the council chambers, Tywin gestured for Aeron to pour the wine. The boy did so with an elegance that belied his years, offering the Dornish lord a respectful bow. The Dornish lord studied Aeron's face for a moment, a flicker of recognition in his expression, but he said nothing, only a few words of mild politeness. But the tension in the room was thick. Later that evening, Tywin told Aeron, "Never forget that some men will see your heritage as a reminder of what was taken from them, or what they lost." He did not need to elaborate on what had been done to the Martell family. Aeron was learning history quickly. He nodded solemnly, storing the warning in his mind as he had so many others. Aeron's 10th name day arrived on a warm morning. Carts of fresh fruit arrived from the Reach. There was bread from the Crownlands, roasted meats from the king's own larder. Tywin spared no expense. In the courtyard, knights performed a small tourney of arms to honor the boy. It was not the grand spectacle that might have been thrown for a royal prince, but it was more than any typical ward received. Joffrey was sullen at having to attend, while Myrcella and Tommen only clapped politely. It was said that Robert was away on yet another hunt, which spared the day any drunken outbursts. After the final tilt, Tywin rose from his seat on the dais and announced that Aeron would now be granted official recognition as a child of House Lannister, with rights to the inheritance Tywin bestowed. Not the official line for Casterly Rock, which Jaime might someday hold, or Tyrion, if Tywin could stomach that possibility, but a claim to land and resources that guaranteed Aeron would remain a figure of wealth and significance. There was polite applause, but an undercurrent of shock. A Targaryen boy, receiving Lannister favor so publicly? It was a move that Tywin orchestrated with care. He wanted the realm to see that the lion and the dragon were, if not merged, at least entwined. And if that made the lords uneasy, all the better. Fear was a tool. In private, Aeron approached Tywin after the feast, eyes wide with gratitude and confusion. "My lord, I thank you," he said. "I never expected such a—" "This is not a gift, boy," Tywin interrupted, though not cruelly. He placed a hand on Aeron's shoulder. "It is an investment. I have watched you grow, seen your talents, your mind. You will make a fine representative of this house in ways my other children cannot. You have something unique, a name that resonates with half the realm, whether they hate or love it. You are my instrument. Do not thank me for forging you." Aeron's small face showed a flicker of uncertainty. "As you say, my lord." In the years that followed, Aeron began traveling at Tywin's side to various locations in the Crownlands and beyond. Wherever they went, rumors preceded them, but also an air of anticipation. People whispered of the Targaryen boy under the lion's wing. Some crowds stared in a mixture of awe and suspicion. Others offered small gestures of reverence, as though the name Targaryen still held magic for them. Aeron handled these encounters with a reserved dignity, exactly as Tywin had instructed. He never bowed or seemed subservient, but he also never boasted or flaunted his heritage. That, Tywin believed, was the path to longevity. When Aeron turned 14, Tywin arranged for him to squire for one of the realm's most reputable knights, Ser Barristan Selmy. Ser Barristan, serving the Kingsguard, had always been an honorable man, respected by Robert but also known to hold a quiet respect for the Targaryens he had once served. Robert was uneasy about letting the Targaryen youth so close to one of the most legendary knights in the realm, but Tywin insisted. He assured the king that the boy needed strong moral guidance and skill in arms, or else he would remain untested, perhaps vulnerable to outside influences. Robert relented, perhaps because the thought of Ser Barristan's unwavering loyalty comforted him. If the boy tried anything, Barristan Selmy would see it and stop it. Squiring for Ser Barristan was an illuminating experience for Aeron. They trained with wooden swords in the yard at dawn. They cleaned armor, cared for horses, learned the nuances of courtesy at feasts. Ser Barristan never displayed open warmth, but neither was he cold. He treated Aeron like any other squire, though sometimes a thoughtful look would cross his face when he saw the boy's Targaryen coloring. Aeron once asked him, "You served my family, did you not?" Ser Barristan nodded, polishing the hilt of his sword. "I served King Aerys and Prince Rhaegar. I was loyal to the crown, as I remain loyal to King Robert now." Aeron watched him with curiosity. Then you must have fought against them in a way when things turned. Not against them, Barristan said quietly. I remained Kingsguard to the very end. But the realm is a complicated place, lad. I do my duty. Those words stayed with Aeron. Duty was something Tywin also taught him. Duty to House Lannister. Duty to the realm in whatever form Tywin deemed it to take. And yet, deep inside, the boy felt a stirring of something else. Something older. A sense of belonging to a lost legacy that no one else in the Red Keep truly shared. He read old texts about the Targaryen kings and queens, trying to piece together a tapestry of his lineage. The more he learned, the more he realized how improbable it was that he now stood as one of the last scions of that house, protected by the very man who had helped topple it. That conflict took root in his heart. But Tywin had taught him well not to show the conflict openly. By the time Aeron neared his 16th name day, he had grown into a striking youth, tall, lean, with pale hair that reached just below his shoulders when unbound. His features were fine, with high cheekbones that accentuated the Targaryen lineage, yet there was something in his posture, a quiet authority that was all Tywin. While not the strongest swordsman, he was quick and adept, and under Ser Barristan's instruction, he learned discipline in combat. He also learned the value of mercy, of chivalry, tempered by the cunning lessons that Tywin never ceased teaching him in council chambers and late-night audiences. The day came when Tywin deemed him ready for a bigger stage. A raven flew into the Red Keep, announcing a grand tourney at Lannisport to celebrate a bountiful season. Knights from across Westeros would gather to compete. Tywin summoned Aeron to his solar, where the golden light of late afternoon streamed across the polished table. You will go to Lannisport, Tywin told him, with Ser Barristan and a suitable escort. This will be your first public display beyond King's Landing. The lords of the West will want to see the Targaryen ward I've raised, especially in the seat of House Lannister's power. Aeron inclined his head. As you command, my lord. You will conduct yourself as a knight in spirit, if not yet in title, Tywin continued. Be courteous, be gracious, and show them the strength of our alliance. Demonstrate that the name Targaryen does not bring chaos, so long as it is bound to the lion. Aeron did not miss the subtle emphasis. Of course, when they reached Lannisport, Aeron found the city teeming with color and noise. Flags bearing the golden lion snapped in the coastal wind. Merchants displayed wares along the harbor, and the clang of smiths echoed up the winding streets. He followed Ser Barristan through the throng, head held high despite the stares. Townsfolk gawked at his pale hair, some bowing or muttering half-remembered curses. But many among the small folk were simply curious, having heard rumors of the Targaryen lad who lived under Lord Tywin's aegis. At the tourney grounds, noble pavilions lined the field. Houses from all over the West had come, as well as representatives from other kingdoms. Aeron made the rounds, exchanging polite words, never failing to introduce himself as Aeron of House Targaryen, ward of Lord Tywin Lannister. Some responded with stiff bows, others with forced smiles. A few younger knights and squires viewed him with fascination, asking if he knew how to tame dragons. Aeron only smiled and said, "If I did, the realm would be a different place." On the second day of the tourney, Aeron participated in the archery competition. Though primarily known for swordplay, he had also spent hours in the yard improving his aim with the bow. Under the watchful eye of Ser Barristan, he loosed arrow after arrow. The final shot landed mere inches from the center of the target, enough to place him in second overall, bested only by a seasoned archer from the Dornish marches. The crowd offered scattered applause, but Tywin's bannermen noted how composed the Targaryen boy was in both victory and defeat. He bowed graciously to the winner, accepted the crowd's polite cheers, and left the field with head unbowed. That evening, a feast took place in the great hall of Lannisport's keep. Aeron found himself seated beside lesser Lannister cousins and the visiting lords. Wine flowed freely, toasts were made to House Lannister, and stories of old heroics were shared. Midway through the meal, a silver-haired woman approached Aeron. She was older, perhaps in her 30s, with a slender frame and the confident poise of one who had traveled the courts of Essos. She leaned in and whispered, "They say you are the last of your house, my lord, but I know secrets. The world is wider than you think." She winked and vanished into the crowd before Aaron could ask her name or meaning. He felt a chill, a realization that no matter how carefully Tywin orchestrated his adoption, the Targaryen name might still call out to others, perhaps across the sea, where exiled loyalists waited for a sign. When Aaron returned to King's Landing, Tywin questioned him closely about every interaction in Lannisport. Aaron mentioned the strange woman, her silver hair, the hint that she knew more about House Targaryen's survival. Tywin's face hardened slightly. "You will forget that woman. If there are Targaryen supporters still scuttling around, let them remain shadows. Your place is here under my guidance." Aaron nodded, though a spark of curiosity flared in his mind. His upbringing had taught him discipline, but it had also awakened a thirst for knowledge. He wondered if others of his blood lived, or if the rumored Daenerys and Viserys might still be alive in distant lands. Another year passed, filled with the usual intrigues of court. King Robert sank deeper into drink and hunting. The crown's debts piled up, and Cersei began to act more boldly in her manipulations. Tywin remained the rock upon which the realm depended. In this environment, Aaron continued to train, to attend councils, learning the craft of governance. He saw how Tywin managed finances, alliances, and punishments. He recognized in Tywin a kind of relentless determination to maintain Lannister supremacy. Aaron no longer questioned whether that was righteous. He recognized it as the simple reality of power. Then came the day Tywin summoned him to the council chamber. The old lion stood at the head of a long table, the sunlight catching threads of silver in his hair. His posture was as unyielding as ever, a testament to his iron will. "It is time," Tywin said, voice echoing off the walls. "You are old enough to undertake tasks on behalf of this house. I am sending you north to Winterfell to represent House Lannister in the negotiations with Lord Eddard Stark." Aaron blinked in surprise. "The north, my lord?" "Yes, the king wishes to hold a great feast in the north next season. He plans to name Lord Eddard as hand upon my retirement, though that will not happen soon if I have any say. Regardless, we must prepare. You will accompany my retinue. Make alliances where you can. Show them that Targaryen and Lannister stand united. The realm is uneasy with the king's whims, and rumors swirl of possible cracks in his rule. We can ill afford disunity." Aaron felt a rush of both excitement and anxiety. He had never traveled so far. He knew the North had little love for Southern politics, and the name Targaryen might carry strange echoes among the Starks. Eddard Stark had fought in Robert's rebellion, had been central to the downfall of House Targaryen. Yet Tywin clearly believed it essential to display Aaron's presence. "I will do as you command," he said, bowing his head. "I will not fail you." They set out weeks later, a caravan of Lannister guards and officials, all with the lion's standard flapping. Aaron rode a dappled gray mare, dressed in a cloak lined with subtle fur to brace against the northern cold. Ser Barristan was not with him. The King's Guard was required in the capital, so he traveled instead with a handful of knights Tywin trusted. The journey north was long, the winds growing chillier each day. The gold of the Lannister banners seemed out of place against the grim gray skies of the Neck, and further on, the snow-dusted roads beyond Moat Cailin. When they arrived at Winterfell, it was almost dusk. The great walls of the ancient castle loomed, smoke drifting from the chimneys, the smell of pine and cold stone in the air. Lord Eddard Stark greeted the Lannister party with customary politeness but a reserved manner. His wife, Lady Catelyn, stood beside him, their children peering out from behind pillars or from the upper balconies. Aaron dismounted carefully. He saw in the Stark's eyes the reflection of his Targaryen coloring, saw the curiosity and perhaps a hint of wariness. Lord Stark spoke in a calm, measured voice. "You are welcome in Winterfell. We shall keep you warm and fed." "I trust Lord Tywin's instructions were clear." Aaron bowed respectfully. "He sends his regards, and I come bearing tokens of goodwill." I am to discuss matters of trade, the upcoming feast, and anything else you require." Ned Stark studied Aeron for a moment, his gray eyes unwavering. "You have the look of your heritage," he said quietly, "but you carry yourself like a Lannister." Aeron allowed himself a small smile. "Lord Tywin has been my guardian since I was an infant, my lord. Then I hope you have learned both caution and honor in his care." "Yes, my lord," Aeron replied, uncertain if the statement was barbed or sincere. The days that followed were a revelation to Aeron. He explored the cold courtyards of Winterfell, the Godswood with its ancient weirwood tree, the old crypts beneath the castle. He watched the Starks at table. Robb, the eldest son, proud and sturdy. Sansa, the poised daughter who dreamed of songs and knights. Arya, the spirited child who seemed eager to defy ladylike norms. Bran, the curious boy who climbed everywhere. And little Rickon, too young to do more than stare. And Jon Snow, the boy with dark hair and reserved manner, the bastard of Lord Eddard, who dined at a separate table but carried himself with quiet dignity. Aeron sensed each child had a role, a piece in some larger tapestry, even if they did not yet know it. He found Ned Stark surprisingly open in their meetings. The Lord listened carefully to Aeron's proposals about the upcoming feast, about the possibility of exchanging goods between the North and the West. Yet behind Ned's politeness, Aeron saw a mind that weighed every word. This was no foolish man. Ned Stark was a quiet presence, a man who likely despised the pomp of southern courts. But he recognized the necessity of alliances. He also recognized, Aeron suspected, that Tywin was sending a message by sending the Targaryen ward. The old lion wanted the North to accept the boy's presence as normal, as inevitable. One evening, after a day of discussion, Ned invited Aeron to walk with him in the Godswood. The sky was dark, the stars hidden by clouds. Braziers cast flickering light on the paths. The weirwood loomed ahead, its face carved in an ancient expression. Ned paused there, resting his hand against the pale trunk. "Your presence here is unexpected," Ned said quietly. "Robert destroyed House Targaryen for what he believed were just reasons. Now Tywin Lannister presents a Targaryen ward to the realm. I cannot help but wonder what Lord Tywin hopes to achieve." Aeron tried to speak evenly, recalling all Tywin's lessons. "He hopes for stability, my lord. The days of open rebellion are behind us. By ensuring I remain under his guardianship, he prevents any Targaryen loyalists from using me as a banner for revolt." Ned turned, his eyes reflecting the torchlight. "Do you believe that is all he seeks?" Aeron hesitated. "I believe he seeks to strengthen the realm, and perhaps to ensure House Lannister stands unchallenged." "I see." Ned's gaze dropped to the still pool beneath the weirwood. "Have you ever questioned the role your house played, the destruction it wrought?" Aeron's throat tightened. "I have read the histories, my lord. I know what the Mad King did, and the cruelty that my name once stood for. But I was a child, an infant, truly. I cannot change those events." Ned's voice softened. "No, you cannot. But you can choose how you carry the name Targaryen. Your father might be Tywin in law, but your blood is from the line of kings. Blood alone does not define us, though. We are shaped by what we do in this life." The words resonated in the cold air. Aeron nodded, uncertain how to respond. Ned Stark offered him a measured look of sympathy, then turned away, leaving Aeron alone by the tree to contemplate the swirling complexities of lineage, loyalty, and the future. Weeks later, when the negotiations were complete and the details of the feast settled, Aeron prepared to depart Winterfell. Ned Stark and his family stood at the gates to bid him farewell. The crisp northern wind tugged at cloaks and hair. Aeron bowed to them, offering a final word of thanks. Then he rode south, leading his small escort down the King's Road. Upon returning to King's Landing, he reported everything to Tywin. The old lion listened intently, every so often nodding at a detail. When Aeron finished, Tywin said, "You did well. The North will host the King's feast, and I trust you have sown seeds of goodwill." Aeron inclined his head. "I did my best, my lord." Tywin's gaze was as piercing as ever. "Lord Stark said nothing of your lineage that offended you?" A flicker of something passed through Aeron. He spoke frankly as a man who fought in the rebellion. "But I was not offended." "Good." Tywin tapped his fingers on the table. "Soon enough, we shall have to decide how best to position you at this feast. There will be many lords, many rumors. I want them to see you not as a threat, but as something more nuanced. A symbol of how the realm can move forward." Aeron recognized the underlying meaning. He was to be a living testament to Tywin's magnanimity, the old lion's ability to rise above old grudges while still keeping the Targaryen line under his claw. Aeron accepted that role outwardly, but deep inside, questions continued to stir. As the year advanced, the king's feast in the north approached, but Robert, ever unpredictable, changed his mind. Rumor had it he preferred to hold a large name-day tourney for Prince Joffrey in King's Landing instead. The logistics shifted, and Tywin adapted, as always. Aeron found himself at the heart of these preparations, helping arrange the finances, the pavilions, the invitations. He even had a seat in the presence of the king and council, though he said little unless asked. Varys the Spider observed him with a curious, knowing smile. Littlefinger offered sly witticisms. Grand Maester Pycelle droned on about tradition. Through it all, Tywin remained the quiet center, orchestrating alliances, ensuring no detail escaped him. The day of the name-day tourney arrived with fanfare. The field outside King's Landing filled with tents and banners. Noble houses from across the realm arrived to celebrate the future king, Joffrey Baratheon. Aeron watched from the royal box as knights jousted. The crowd roared, and minstrels played lively tunes. The heat of the day was oppressive. Robert reclined in his seat, guzzling wine, while Cersei watched with a haughty smile. Joffrey wore regal attire, but his sneer suggested he found the festivities either beneath him or too full of the lesser folk for his tastes. Myrcella and Tommen clapped politely. Sansa Stark, now betrothed to Joffrey, watched with the wide-eyed excitement of a young girl enthralled by courtly romance. Arya Stark sat further off, squirming in boredom at the pomp. Ned Stark and his retinue had traveled south, fulfilling the king's earlier request. Once again, Aeron crossed paths with the quiet Lord of Winterfell. They exchanged polite greetings, nothing more. As the justs continued, knights fell, lances shattered. Jaime Lannister rode out in shining armor, displaying the graceful skill that made him famous. Men cheered for the Kingslayer, though some did so in hushed tones, mindful of the complicated title he bore. In the final tilt, Jaime bested a promising young knight from the Reach. Trumpets blared, and Jaime rode to the stands to offer the victor's homage to the king. Then, to everyone's surprise, Jaime turned his horse slightly toward Aeron, dipping his lance in a faint salute. The crowd went quiet for a heartbeat, uncertain of the gesture. Aeron inclined his head respectfully. Perhaps Jaime was acknowledging him not out of affection, but to stoke the rumors that House Lannister was more united than ever, Targaryen ward included. Or perhaps it was simply Jaime's theatrical side. At the feast that evening, the castle halls rang with music and laughter, though Robert was already drunk. Aeron made his rounds among the tables, exchanging words with lords and ladies. Some offered compliments on his attire, a black doublet embroidered with the three-headed dragon and golden lion entwined. Others asked him about dragons, half joking. He fielded their questions politely, always returning the focus to the greatness of House Lannister and the peace that Robert's reign maintained. Halfway through the night, Ned Stark approached him, a goblet of wine in hand. "You conduct yourself with grace," he said, voice quiet so no one else could overhear. "Lord Tywin trained me well," Aeron replied. Ned studied him. "And what of the Targaryen part of you? Do you feel it has no place in who you are?" Aeron hesitated, uncertain how candid he could be in a room filled with watchful eyes. "It lives in me, my lord, but this is the world I know." Ned nodded as if expecting that answer. "If you ever need the truth of what befell your house, what truly happened during the rebellion, you can ask. Many stories are told at court, and not all are true. Aeron considered that. The idea both intrigued and unsettled him. "Thank you, my lord." When Ned walked away, Aeron felt the weight of his words. The truth of what befell his house was not a secret to Tywin, yet Tywin had shared only the bare minimum. The horrors of the sack of King's Landing, the deaths of Rhaegar's children, the way Tywin's men had brutally ended what remained of the Targaryen line. Those were details Aeron had gleaned from rumor and carefully reading between the lines. But now Ned Stark offered to share his knowledge. Aeron wondered if he had the courage to hear it. Before he could decide, a commotion arose near the dais. King Robert, in his cups, had begun to rail at some poor minstrel who had sung an old Dornish ballad. Robert hated all things that reminded him of Rhaegar Targaryen, especially songs that romanticized that era. He bellowed curses, flinging his goblet, and the minstrel cringed. The room hushed as Robert demanded the minstrel sing something else, or face a beating. Aeron tensed, remembering that the realm was not always stable, that the king could be unpredictable. But the moment passed when Cersei signaled a guard to escort the minstrel away. Robert roared with laughter, downing more wine, his cheeks flushed. The feast resumed, but the tension lingered like a sour note in the air. In the days that followed, Aeron continued to sense the precarious balance of King's Landing. Tywin was the true pillar holding the realm together. Robert reigned in name, spending coin on tournaments and feasts. Cersei schemed, as did other lords hungry for power. Meanwhile, whispers reached Aeron of plots brewing beyond the sea. Daenerys Targaryen, sister of Rhaegar, rumored to have wed a Dothraki horse lord named Khal Drogo. If that was true, then Aeron was not the last Targaryen after all. He read the news with a mix of dread and wonder. Another Targaryen, one who might come to Westeros with a Dothraki horde, or who might die in the barren seas of the east. Tywin said nothing of it to Aeron, but the tension in the castle thickened. Varys scurried with more urgency, eavesdropping in corners. The realm might be forced to reckon with dragons again or a shadow of them. In the midst of that swirling uncertainty, Tywin made another bold move. He began negotiations to secure Aeron a betrothal. Aeron learned of it one morning when a messenger arrived from Casterly Rock with sealed documents. Tywin spent hours in private council, then summoned Aeron. "You are nearly of age," Tywin began. "It is time to forge a match that benefits House Lannister. I have prospects in mind." Aeron stiffened. Marriage was a concept he had scarcely considered. "Who, my lord?" Tywin's lips curved faintly. "There are a few possibilities. Some lesser noble daughters from the Reach, perhaps a match that cements ties between the West and South. Or maybe the Riverlands, since House Tully is allied to the Starks. But I am also considering forging an alliance with Dorne. Their animosity toward the Lannisters is known, but a Targaryen-Lannister union might be the bridge that soothes old wounds. The Martells revered Elia, but they also revered the Targaryen line. It might be time to heal. Aeron understood the logic, but the notion of wedding someone for purely political reasons caused a twist in his stomach. He was a piece on Tywin's board, after all. "As you will," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. In the weeks that followed, ravens flew back and forth between King's Landing and Sunspear. The negotiations were delicate. Dorne still bore scars from the sack of King's Landing, where Elia Martell and her children had been slain. But now Tywin offered them a Targaryen scion, bound to House Lannister by adoption. If Dorne accepted, it would be a step toward bridging the rift. If they refused, it would be an insult that might deepen old wounds. Finally, word arrived that Prince Doran Martell was open to the match, provided certain conditions were met. Most importantly, that Aeron keep the Targaryen name and that Dorne receive certain trade concessions and judicial rights. Tywin's jaw clenched at some of their demands, but he recognized the value. "We will meet them halfway," he declared. "The benefits outweigh the costs." Thus, Aeron found himself betrothed, on parchment at least, to Arianne Martell, the heiress of Dorne. He had never met her, knew her only by reputation as a proud, clever woman, older than he by a few years. The realm buzzed with speculation. A Targaryen ward of House Lannister, set to wed the Princess of Dorne? It was a scandalous, fascinating notion. Some saw it as a long-overdue effort to make amends for past atrocities. Others believed it was another of Tywin's cunning maneuvers to keep potential enemies close. Aeron felt torn, uncertain how to view his own future. He had grown up in the Red Keep, shaped by Lannister gold and discipline. Yet now he was being cast into the swirling politics of Dorne, where his Targaryen name might have a kind of mythical resonance. Amid the rising tensions, rumors of Daenerys Targaryen's ascendance in the east, the king's declining health, and increasing friction between the Lannisters and other great houses, the betrothal was set for a date months away. Plans were made for a grand wedding in King's Landing, presided over by the High Septon. Envoys from Dorne arrived, bringing gifts of exotic spices, Dornish wines, and silks for Aeron. They studied him with guarded interest, as if trying to see if he resembled the Targaryens they once revered. Aeron received them politely, wearing the combined sigil on his doublet, his hair neatly tied back. He had grown more confident, more at ease with his dual heritage, at least on the surface. One afternoon, Aeron wandered into the courtyard to find Tyrion Lannister perched on a low wall, reading a thick tome. Tyrion glanced up, a wry smile on his face. "Ah, the dragon lion himself," he said. "Come to reflect on your impending nuptials?" Aeron shrugged. "I came to clear my head." Tyrion snapped the book shut. "I envy you in a sense. A Martell bride is likely to be fascinating. Certainly more interesting than some dull lady from the Stormlands. But do be careful. The Martells are proud. They remember everything." "You speak as if I have a choice," Aeron said, a hint of bitterness creeping into his tone. "No, you don't," Tyrion said bluntly. "Nor did I when father tried to arrange marriages for me. We are all pieces in his game, dear cousin Ward. But that doesn't mean we can't find our own amusements or carve out bits of freedom here and there." Aeron considered Tyrion's words. The imp was sharper than most realized, and his cynicism sometimes lifted the curtain on truths Aeron preferred not to face. "What would you have me do?" "Nothing," Tyrion replied, hopping down from the wall. "Do exactly as father says. That's how to stay alive around here, is it not? But keep your eyes open, dear Aeron. You never know when a dragon might want to spread its wings." Tyrion ambled away, leaving Aeron with the unsettling feeling that the dwarf spoke in riddles that pointed to deeper realities. Perhaps it was true. Perhaps one day Aeron would have to decide whether to remain under Tywin's iron guidance or to seek a path more true to the Targaryen name. But for now, the safer course was to obey. The months rolled on. The city braced for the grand wedding. Arianne Martell arrived with her retinue, stepping onto the docks of King's Landing in a swirl of Dornish style. She was indeed older than Aeron by a handful of years, with olive skin, dark, inquisitive eyes, and hair that cascaded in black waves. She carried herself like someone accustomed to command, and her gaze flickered over Aeron appraisingly when they were introduced in the throne room. Tywin, standing to the side, watched every nuance of their interaction. Aeron bowed, offered words of welcome. Arianne inclined her head, a flicker of a smile on her lips. Their betrothal feast took place that night, a lavish affair with wine, music, and dancing. Arianne danced with Aeron, her movements fluid, her gaze never leaving his. "They call you the Targaryen ward, but you wear the lion's mane," she teased. "Are you more lion or dragon?" Aeron tried to laugh lightly. "I suppose I am both, my lady." She regarded him closely. "I've heard tales of dragons born in storms, and lions who devour all who cross them. I wonder which fate awaits you." Before he could answer, the dance ended, and others swept in to claim them. Yet the question lingered in Aeron's mind. Which fate awaited him, indeed? In the following days, he and Arianne walked the gardens of the Red Keep, talking of inconsequential things at first: music, food, the weather in Dorne versus King's Landing. Gradually, they delved deeper. She asked about his upbringing, his knowledge of Targaryen history. He asked her of Dorne's customs, of the Martell family's secrets. They spoke openly, though always aware that the walls had ears. Arianne was clever, and it became clear that she, like Tyrion, recognized that Tywin's chessboard had many pieces, and that Aeron was both bishop and rook, maybe even a potential queen if used correctly. She told him that Doran Martell had insisted on the marriage not just to avenge the past, but to secure a future for Dorne, one where they might influence the Iron Throne more directly. One evening, as they strolled along a corridor overlooking Blackwater Bay, Arryn turned to him and said softly, "We both know this is a marriage of politics, but it does not have to be empty." There was a gentle warmth in her voice, an offer of companionship in a realm built on cold strategy. Arryn, still uncertain of how to handle genuine warmth, replied carefully, "I hope we can find common ground, my lady. I have never been to Dorne, but I hear it is beautiful." She smiled. "We shall see it together, if the realm remains at peace long enough." If the realm remained at peace. That was an increasingly big if. Rumors grew of Daenerys Targaryen's rise among the Dothraki. Whispers of dragons being reborn, of magic in the east. King Robert began to rant more often, his hatred for Targaryens reigniting at every mention of Daenerys. Meanwhile, Ned Stark discovered unsettling truths about the parentage of Cersei's children, secrets that threatened to tear the realm apart. Tywin worked tirelessly behind the scenes to contain the chaos, but events began to slip from even his iron grasp. Arryn, caught in the swirl, found himself uncertain of his place. He wore the Targaryen name but owed everything to Tywin. He was betrothed to a Martell, a match meant to heal old wounds yet also stoke new ambitions. The realm stood on the brink of conflict, with threats looming from every corner. Cersei's cunning, Robert's decline, the potential return of dragons across the sea. Each day, the tension in King's Landing ratcheted higher. Then, one fateful afternoon, Ned Stark confronted the royal family with the truth of Joffrey's parentage, a scandal that erupted into chaos. Robert lay dying from a boar's wound he had taken on a drunken hunt. Cersei seized power in the name of Joffrey, labeling Ned Stark a traitor. Swords were drawn in the corridors, the gold cloaks shifting allegiances, the realm lurching into turmoil. Tywin was in the west at the time, rallying forces to handle another threat, so he was not in King's Landing to quell the storm. Arryn found himself in the Red Keep as Lannister guards roamed the halls, rounding up Stark men. Arryn Martell had retreated to her suite, guarded by Dornish soldiers. Arryn tried to keep calm, but the sight of blood in the courtyard, the screams from the dungeons, made his heart pound. He was Targaryen, yes, but he was also Lannister. He had not expected this turn, did not know where his loyalties should lie in a sudden civil war. When news came that Ned Stark was sentenced to die, Arryn felt a jolt of horror. He recalled the man's quiet honor, his willingness to share truths about the rebellion. He also realized that Joffrey, as king, could not be trusted to show mercy. The boy king took sadistic pleasure in displays of power. In a desperate move, Arryn slipped away from the watchful eyes of the Lannister guards and made his way to the dungeons, hoping to speak with Ned Stark. He found the man battered, locked behind heavy bars. Ned looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. "What are you doing here?" Ned rasped, his voice echoing in the damp stone corridor. Arryn pressed close to the bars. "I had to see you, my lord. This is madness. I know you are no traitor. Will they truly kill you?" Ned's eyes held resignation. Joffrey has already pronounced the sentence. If Lord Tywin were here, perhaps cooler heads would prevail. But Tywin is away, and Cersei holds the city. Unless I falsely confess and swear fealty, they will end my life. Arryn felt helpless. He was not yet a knight. He had no position on the council, and the Lannister soldiers owed their loyalty to Cersei and Joffrey. He couldn't openly defy them. And yet, as he looked at the man who had once offered him a glimpse of truth, he felt shame that a Targaryen living under Tywin's roof could do nothing to prevent further bloodshed. I am sorry," he whispered. Ned Stark's gaze softened, a surprising kindness in that moment. "You owe me no apology. You did not ask for any of this. Take care that you do not become a pawn in a larger game you cannot see." Arryn stood there, the chill of the dungeons seeping into his bones. Then he turned and left, guilt and fury warring within him. The next day, Joffrey executed Ned Stark publicly. War broke out across the realm. Robb Stark raised the North in rebellion. Renly Baratheon and Stannis Baratheon contested the throne. Tywin rushed back to King's Landing to command the Lannister forces. Aerion Martell, appalled by the savage politics, withdrew to Dorne for safety, though the betrothal remained in theory. In the chaos, Aeron found himself at Tywin's side, traveling with the Lannister host. Tywin placed him under the command of seasoned knights, not to lead, but to observe, to see how war was truly fought. Aeron felt the weight of a sword in his hand as the armies marched, hearing the thunder of hooves, the ring of steel. For the first time, he glimpsed the cost of power in the raw fields of battle. He watched men scream and die, saw villages burned in the path of armies. Amid these horrors, Tywin never faltered. He commanded with ruthless efficiency, forging alliances with the Tyrells, beating back the Stark forces when he could, maneuvering pieces on the chessboard. Aeron, forced to witness the Lannister methods of war, felt a growing unease. This was the cost of forging an unbreakable dynasty, a union of lion and dragon, blood, fire, and gold. Could there be another path? When the war reached a stalemate of sorts, multiple kings fighting for multiple causes, Tywin summoned Aeron to his tent. Maps lay strewn across a wooden table, the flicker of candlelight casting shadows on Tywin's stern features. "We are on the brink of changing the realm forever," Tywin said. "Robb Stark, Renly, Stannis, all those who oppose the rightful King Joffrey, must be brought to heel. Our alliance with Dorne remains uncertain, but if we can secure it, if we can keep the Tyrells close, we will stand victorious." Aeron mustered his courage. "My lord, is there no chance for peace?" Tywin's eyes narrowed. "Peace? The Starks are in open rebellion. Stannis claims the throne, and Renly fancies himself a king. Peace will come when all challengers kneel. That is the way of the world. I thought you understood." Aeron hesitated, recalling the lessons Tywin had taught him. Cunning, power, the will to rule. "I do, my lord." "Good," Tywin said. "When this is done and the realm is reunited under King Joffrey, or whomever proves to be the strongest, our house will stand unchallenged. And you will have a place in it, Aeron Targaryen, as living proof that House Lannister can adopt and transcend old hatreds. That is how dynasties are forged, not just by swords, but by shaping the narrative of who we are." In that moment, Aeron realized the depth of Tywin's ambition. It wasn't merely about crushing foes. It was about remaking the realm in his image, with House Lannister at the center, absorbing even the Targaryen name to add prestige and mystique. Aeron was meant to be the keystone of that new order, a symbol that would last generations. But symbols have minds of their own, hearts of their own. As the war dragged on, as battles were fought and lost, Aeron quietly wrestled with the meaning of his lineage. He remembered the cryptic words from Ned Stark, the cautionary advice from Tyrion, the quiet acceptance of Ser Barristan. He remembered the horrifying spectacle of Ned's execution, the injustice that had unleashed a storm of blood across the realm. He was Targaryen, the line of kings who once united Westeros under dragons. He was Lannister, shaped by Tywin's unbending will. His betrothed, Aerion Martell, lingered in Dorne, uncertain whether to join the war or bide her time. The war escalated. At one point, Tywin arranged a cunning ruse that forced Robb Stark to split his forces, but the young wolf proved too clever, scoring victories that alarmed even the old lion. Another time, Tywin negotiated with Walder Frey, forging an alliance that set off a chain of events culminating in the infamous Red Wedding, a savage betrayal that saw the downfall of Robb Stark. Aeron did not attend that wedding. He only heard the aftermath and felt a cold shudder that Tywin's unwavering pragmatism could condone such treachery. When Aeron finally returned to King's Landing, the war seemed nearly won for the Lannisters. Joffrey sat on the throne, though new threats arose in the form of Stannis at the Wall and Daenerys Targaryen rising with an army in Meereen. Through it all, Tywin stood triumphant, forging alliances, collecting debts, ensuring the Lannister name overshadowed all. He welcomed Aeron back with a reserved nod. "Your place is here. We have more to do," he said, as if the realm were a tapestry still in need of finishing touches. In the months that followed, Aeron found himself increasingly torn. He admired Tywin's discipline, his dedication to order, yet he could not shake the memory of the cruelties inflicted upon the realm in pursuit of that order. The Targaryen name lingered on his lips like a half-forgotten promise. Daenerys's growing power across the sea haunted him, a cousin or aunt he had never met, forging her own destiny with dragons reclaimed from legend. Where did that leave him? Adopted by the man who had toppled her family, raised as a symbol of unity in a kingdom stained by betrayals. One evening, he stood on a balcony overlooking Blackwater Bay. The city's lights shimmered on the water, and distant sails dotted the horizon. Tyrion joined him, leaning on the stone railing. "You look troubled, dear cousin Ward," Tyrion said softly. Aeron sighed. "The war is nearly over. House Lannister stands victorious. Yet I wonder if we have lost more than we gained." Tyrion's mismatched eyes flickered with empathy. "Power is a curious thing. Father believes in the power of fear, of gold, of strategy. Others believe in the power of love or the threat of dragonfire. You straddle both worlds, my friend. Perhaps one day you'll find a way to balance them." Aeron looked at the flickering lights below. "I don't even know if that's possible, but I can't escape who I am. I can't escape what Tywin made me, or the name I bear." "No," Tyrion said. "You cannot, but maybe you can forge something new." He poured himself a cup of wine, offering Aeron a rye toast. "To forging the unbreakable dynasty Father so desperately wants. May it be kinder than the wars that birthed it." Aeron accepted the cup, the taste of the wine mingling with uncertainty. He thought of the future of Arryn Martell, of a realm that might someday be ruled by a mix of lion, dragon, and sun. He thought of how Tywin had shaped him, how that shaping came with a cost. Could he uphold the better parts of that legacy while discarding the cruelties? Or was he forever bound to be just another piece in Tywin's grand design? The night winds carried the faint echo of sea spray and the hush of a city readying for the next day's struggles. Somewhere in the east, Daenerys Targaryen, the mother of dragons, might be preparing to sail for Westeros, bringing fire and fury. But here, in King's Landing, Tywin Lannister's adoptive son watched the waves and contemplated a world that might one day unite the best of both lion and dragon, if he had the courage to claim that destiny for himself. So the days turned into months, the seasons shifting. In private corners of the Red Keep, Tywin still met with Aeron, schooling him in statecraft, in the knowledge that war's end meant a new beginning for the realm. The boy who had been found in a swirl of rumor and prophecy, the Targaryen babe raised under the lion's watchful eye, had become a man of quiet strength and sharp intelligence. The seeds of Tywin's ambition had sprouted into something formidable, a Targaryen Lannister scion with the capacity to shape hearts and minds in a way few pure-blooded Lannisters could. Some courtiers whispered that if Daenerys ever landed in Westeros, the realm might turn to Aeron as a mediator between the Targaryen queen and the Lannisters who held the throne, forging a compromise that averted yet another devastating war. Others whispered that if Daenerys came with fire and blood, Aeron might be the first to betray his adoptive family, siding with the true Targaryen line. Still others speculated that Tywin had orchestrated it all, that Aeron was a sleeper agent meant to assassinate or subdue any other Targaryen who challenged the crown. No one knew the truth, perhaps not even Aeron himself. But beneath the rumors lay a simpler reality, a young man shaped by two great legacies, each scarred by violence and ambition, each yearning for dominion over the Seven Kingdoms. If Tywin's dream of an unbreakable dynasty was to endure, it would hinge on Aeron's choices, on whether he could reconcile the lion's ruthless drive with the dragon's ancestral mystique, whether he could bring forth a realm that learned from the atrocities of the past, forging a future that need not be drowned in blood. And so he stood on the precipice of a new era, gazing out over the city of King's Landing with war behind him and uncertainty ahead. The Iron Throne loomed within the Red Keep, a seat of blades that had burned many a king and queen. In his mind's eye, Aeron could see the shape of it, the twisted swords, the hammered steel. He could almost hear the roar of a distant dragon, the rumble of a lion's roar echoing in the halls. two beasts joined by fate in his very blood. The realm waited, holding its breath, to see whether that union would truly forge the unbreakable dynasty Tywin Lannister craved, or if another great war of fire and blood would consume them all. Aeron Targaryen found himself neither in the Godswood nor by the sea, but somewhere in that dim, uncharted realm between lion and dragon, duty and desire, promise and threat. Days bled into nights in King's Landing while the memory of war was still fresh as a bandaged wound. The city had learned to live under the Lannister banner, yet conflict simmered behind every facade of victory. The throne was still hot with the aftermath of rebellion. Servants whispered that Daenerys Targaryen gathered armies in the east, that dragons lived again. But for many in King's Landing, the immediate drama revolved around King Joffrey, the boy who wore the crown like a weapon. He paraded knights and courtiers through the Red Keep and threatened to unleash his royal wrath on anyone who dared displease him, be they commoners or his own counselors. None doubted that if Joffrey was the realm's future, that future would be anything but gentle. Aeron's 16th year had melted into his 17th, and now toward his 18th, and he had witnessed enough bloodshed to last a lifetime. The War of the Five Kings had ended in tatters for most of those who claimed crowns. Robb Stark was dead, the Tyrells had bent the knee to the Iron Throne, Renly was gone, and Stannis lingered in the north with a meager force. The Lannisters were, for now, ascendant, and Tywin Lannister stood at the apex of power in all but official name. Yet there was an unease in the Red Keep that refused to disperse. Perhaps it was the knowledge that King Robert's only surviving brothers might still pose a threat, or that the North would never forgive the atrocities of the Red Wedding, or that Dorne might nurse its own grudges until the time was right. Aeron felt it every day in the corridors, that invisible tension tightening like a harp string about to snap. He felt it when the King's Guard saluted him, uncertain whether he deserved the courtesy or whether he was just another ward Tywin had placed in a position of seeming importance. He felt it when he sat through council sessions, overshadowed by his adoptive father's presence, forced to watch as matters of coin, supply lines, and marriage pacts were decided in brisk, measured tones. And he felt it most keenly whenever he tried to catch a moment with Arianne Martell, who had returned to King's Landing at Tywin's request once the war's major battles were done. She had come with a small retinue of Dornish ladies and guards, escorted by knights sporting the sun and spear of House Martell. Her dark eyes watched everything in the Red Keep with feline alertness. Her father, Prince Doran, had agreed that in time of near victory for the Lannisters, it was wiser to preserve ties than risk open war. But Arianne knew, as did everyone else, that Dorne's cooperation was far from guaranteed. Too many wounds from the past festered, most of them inflicted by Tywin's forces decades ago. The betrothal between Aeron and Arianne was one thread in a tapestry designed to keep Dorne pliable. On some days, it felt like the only thread. Aeron often found her near the sunlit window in Maegor's Holdfast, gazing out at the city and harbor. Sometimes she spoke of the hot deserts of Dorne, of Sunspear's winding gardens and water tunnels. She would describe the taste of sweet wine pressed from Dornish grapes, how it differed from Arbor Gold or any other vintage. Other times, her voice grew sharp when she referenced Oberyn Martell's rage at the Lannisters, or the memory of Elia Martell, Rhaegar's wife, who had perished so brutally. Arianne never mentioned it directly to Aeron, but he could sense the weight in her words. The Targaryens had once been Dorne's beloved allies. The Lannisters had once been their hated foes. Aeron stood between those two truths in a single name. She would ask him sometimes, "Did Tywin ever tell you about Rhaegar and Elia? About what truly befell their children?" Aeron would glance away. He knew only the broad strokes. "He told me little, only that the war was swift and many died. He called it a tragedy, but a necessary one." Her full lips curved with quiet bitterness. "And so House Targaryen was ended, or so they thought. Some claim you are all that remains, aside from the Dragon Princess across the sea. Strange to think it is Tywin Lannister who holds your leash. Does it wound your pride to serve the man who orchestrated such horrors?" Aeron never had a satisfying answer. "I was an infant when Tywin took me in. He made me what I am. I respect him, but I cannot ignore the past. That is the trouble, isn't it?" Arianne would say, her voice wistful. Then she would reach out and let her fingertips graze Aaron's arm. "You and I are pawns, but we need not remain so forever." Those words lingered in Aaron's mind. He had grown accustomed to playing the role set for him, but each passing day he felt the slow burn of frustration. Being a ward was one thing, being a puppet was another. Yet he knew Tywin's power was immense. To defy him openly would be to risk ruin. Besides, the realm was precarious. If he turned on Tywin, who would accept a Targaryen adoptive son with open arms? The North that had once followed Ned Stark? The Stormlands under the uncertain stance of Renly's leftover bannermen, or Stannis' scattered forces? The Vale with Lisa Arryn cowering behind her gates? The Riverlands, devastated by war? Or Dorne, whose loyalty was complicated? He was reflecting on this quandary one morning when a flurry of trumpets summoned all nobles and courtiers to the Great Hall. Joffrey had declared a new celebration, a feast and ceremony to precede his formal wedding to Margaery Tyrell. The city bustled with anticipation, for the Tyrells had come in force. The indomitable Olenna Redwine, the graceful Margaery, her father Mace Tyrell, and their many bannermen. Streets were hung with floral wreaths and golden banners. Joffrey's wedding would be the grandest event since Robert Baratheon had wed Cersei Lannister, and more than one observer noted that a joyous wedding might help wash away the blood spilled in the last few years. Aaron found himself reluctantly impressed by the pageantry. Sunlight streamed through the windows of the Red Keep as Margaery Tyrell arrived on a litter draped in golden cloth. Joffrey preened beside her, practically glowing with self-satisfaction at the crowds who had turned out to see the royal couple. Cersei watched from behind a careful mask. Tyrion stood near the dais, discreet in his finery, while Tywin presided over everything with calm authority. Jaime lurked to the side in Kingsguard armor, looking at no one. Musicians played, feasts were laid out in the throne room, and the entire city hummed with lively gossip. In the midst of the festivities, Aaron caught glimpses of Margaery's bright smile. She was charming, gracious, showering Joffrey with compliments. The small folk adored her, and the court was equally smitten by her ability to soothe even Joffrey's worst impulses, for a time at least. Aaron wondered how genuine that was. Tyrion had once told him that Margaery was as quick-witted as her grandmother, and that the Tyrells were not to be underestimated. They might pose as gentle gardeners, but their thorns were sharp. If Margaery was caging the lion that was Joffrey, it might only be to gain influence. The wedding itself was planned for the morrow, a grand affair by the September of Baelor, followed by a feast in the Red Keep's courtyard, surrounded by lavish tapestries and fountains. Aaron found it all overwhelming. He had seldom seen the city in such a state of manic joy, as if everyone wanted to forget the war and cling to a day of splendor. But beneath that joy, he sensed the ever-present tension. Soldiers were posted at every corner. The King's Guard patrolled restlessly. There were still rumors of rebellions in the Riverlands, and the threat of Stannis or even Daenerys lingered in every political conversation. And, as always, the question of Dorne's true loyalty hung in the air. On the morning of the wedding, Aaron dressed in a doublet that Tywin had commissioned especially for him. Black velvet with the three-headed dragon and the golden lion intertwined in silver thread upon the breast. It was bold, a reminder to all that House Lannister harbored the last Targaryen scion, so far as they knew, and that he was no threat so long as Tywin's power prevailed. Aaron wore it without pride or shame, merely accepting his role in the spectacle. He took his place near the dais inside the sept, watching as Margaery arrived in a gown of green and gold. The High Septon performed the ceremony before a mass of lords and ladies. Joffrey was resplendent in crimson and gold, a crown of wrought roses and rubies gleaming on his brow. Aaron saw how tight Cersei's smile was, how Jaime's expression was unreadable, how Tyrion stood near the back, quietly sipping from a flask. When the vows were done, the crowd roared. It was official. Joffrey and Margaery, king and queen, a new era for House Baratheon and House Tyrell, though everyone knew the Lannisters truly pulled the strings. Then came the feast in the courtyard, a spectacle of color and fragrance. Tables groaned under the weight of roasted boars, quail stuffed with herbs, honeycakes in the shape of lions. Musicians played lilting tunes. Tumblers and fools cavorted for the king's amusement. Aeron sat to one side, near Tyrion, who occupied a place much lower than Joffrey or Tywin, partly punishment for his general cynicism, no doubt. Aeron ate sparingly, more interested in observing than indulging. He noted Cersei glaring at Margaery's extended family, each in turn, as if worried they might overshadow her beloved son. He noted that Arianne Martell had not traveled from her chamber for this event. She had made an excuse of a lingering illness, though the real reason was surely her distaste for the Lannisters' triumphant display. Aeron wished she had come, if only so he might have an ally nearby, someone who understood his ambivalence. Instead, he found himself alone in a sea of pageantry. Midway through the feast, Joffrey decided to stage a cruel mock battle of dwarfs, clearly intending it as an insult to Tyrion. The guests watched with varying degrees of horror and amusement. Tyrion's face twitched with anger, but he kept it under control, no doubt mindful that any outburst could prove disastrous. The entire affair was an ugly spectacle, designed to entertain Joffrey's sadistic humor. Aeron felt a flush of shame by association. This was the king he was meant to serve? A callous boy who mocked the weak and reveled in cruelty? When the mock battle ended, Joffrey demanded more wine. A golden chalice was brought to him. He drank deeply, sneering at Tyrion. Moments later, he began to choke, clutching his throat. The color drained from his face. He staggered, eyes bulging, foam and blood flecking his lips. Screams echoed through the courtyard as Joffrey collapsed. Cersei shrieked, cradling her son's body. Chaos erupted. Guests stumbled away from the dais. Guards rushed forward. Margaery shrank back in horror. Joffrey died swiftly, a strangled rattle in his throat. The wine spilled at his feet, turning dark red against the pale stone. Aeron stood rooted, stunned. He saw Tyrion kneeling by the fallen chalice, saw the accusations in Cersei's eyes as she screamed, "He poisoned my son! Seize my brother!" The gold cloaks obeyed, dragging a shocked Tyrion away. King Joffrey was dead, murdered at his own wedding feast. The city would reel from the blow. The Lannisters would reel too. Tywin, near the dais, barked commands to the guards, trying to restore order, but there was none to be had. The once festive courtyard descended into panic and suspicion. In the aftermath, as the body was taken away and the guests scattered, Tywin called for an urgent council meeting. Aeron was beckoned to attend. He found the atmosphere in the council chamber thick with fear and fury. Cersei stood trembling, still in her gown, tears streaking her face. She accused Tyrion of regicide, demanded that he be tried and executed for killing Joffrey. Tywin listened with a calm veneer, but the set of his jaw revealed a deep anger. The Tyrells were outraged as well, though privately some may have breathed relief. Margaery was free of a cruel husband, but the manner of his death was horrifying. "The kingdom must see that justice is done," Tywin declared in a cold voice. "Tyrion shall stand trial for regicide. The evidence will be presented, and he shall have a chance to defend himself. Until then, he will remain a prisoner in the Red Keep." Cersei spat. "He deserves no defense. He murdered the king." Tywin silenced her with a single glare. "We will do this properly or not at all. The realm is in shock. We must show strength, not lawless vengeance." Aeron watched the exchange, stomach churning. He did not believe Tyrion had killed Joffrey. It was too convenient a scapegoat, too obvious, and Tyrion was not fool enough to kill the king in front of half the realm. But logic mattered little in the face of grief and rage. If Tywin believed his own son was guilty, or found it expedient to say so, no one would contradict him. In the days that followed, the city was placed under tight security. Tommen, a boy younger and far milder than Joffrey, was hailed as the new king. Cersei hovered over him, determined to shape him into her next puppet. Tywin worked to calm the realm, negotiating with the Tyrells to preserve the alliance by betrothing Margaery to Tommen. Meanwhile, Tyrion languished in a cell beneath the Red Keep. Rumors flew. Some claimed Peter Baelish had orchestrated the murder. Others whispered of the Tyrells' involvement. pointing to the wine or the pie. Few dared say it outright, but many suspected Cersei's rage blinded her to more subtle conspiracies. Aeron tried to speak with Tywin about his doubts, but the old lion brushed him off. "This is not your concern. The realm needs stability. Tyrion's trial will provide that. The evidence is overwhelming in the minds of the court. Your role, Aeron, is to maintain composure. Dorne watches every move we make. Do not give them reason to question our authority." So Aeron obeyed, outwardly calm, inwardly turbulent. Arianne Martell finally emerged from her chambers, wearing a mask of polite horror at the king's murder. She found Aeron in the gallery overlooking the throne room and took his arm gently. "So the lion devours its own tail now," she murmured. "What do you make of this, my lord?" He could not hide his distress. "I think Tyrion is no murderer, but he will be blamed. Tywin will see it through if it secures order. I do not know what becomes of us in the midst of so much suspicion." She nodded. "And yet, if the Lannisters weaken themselves with internal strife, might that not open a path for Targaryens to reclaim their rightful place?" Her tone was mild, as if testing him. He glanced at her, uneasy. "If you mean Daenerys, I don't even know if she is truly coming. We have only rumors. And if she did come, how could we know her intentions?" Arianne's eyes gleamed. "We cannot. But Dorne might welcome her if she offered justice. Elia was her sister by marriage. Many would say Daenerys has a rightful claim. Your name alone, Targaryen, might bridge that alliance if you wished it." Aeron felt a rush of fear and longing in equal measure. The notion of reuniting with the true Targaryen line had always been a distant fantasy. He was sworn to Tywin, shaped by him, placed in a betrothal that was meant to unify Dorne with the Lannisters, not with Daenerys Targaryen. "You speak treason," he whispered. "I speak possibilities," Arianne corrected softly. "Treason depends on which side triumphs in the end." The trial of Tyrion Lannister commenced soon after. The throne room was packed with lords and ladies, the new King Tommen seated precariously upon the Iron Throne, with Tywin in practical control of the proceedings. Cersei brought forward a parade of witnesses, each offering some damning recollection or twisted account of Tyrion's words and deeds. Shae, Tyrion's former lover, gave false testimony that seemed to all but seal his fate. Aeron watched Tyrion's expression tighten with rage and despair, though the dwarf let no tears fall. When called to speak, Tyrion launched into a defiant speech that shocked the court. He raged at the hypocrisy of the proceedings, declared he wished he had enough poison for the entire gathering. Then he demanded trial by combat. The request sent a ripple through the hall. Tywin's mouth became a thin line. Trial by combat could undermine the neat plan for Tyrion's condemnation if Tyrion's chosen champion somehow prevailed. The Lannisters turned to the Kingsguard for a champion, and it was agreed that Ser Gregor Clegane, the Mountain, would fight on the crown's behalf. Tyrion, friendless, seemed doomed, until Oberyn Martell unexpectedly rose from his seat. A hush fell. Oberyn volunteered to champion Tyrion, announcing he wished to face the Mountain, the man who had raped and murdered his sister Elia. Cersei was aghast, but Tywin could hardly refuse. The trial by combat was set for the following day in the Red Keep's courtyard. That night, Arianne Martell vanished from the corridors, presumably to speak with her uncle Oberyn. Aeron paced his room, heart pounding. Tyrion's life balanced on this fight. If Oberyn won, Tyrion would go free, and Oberyn might finally have his vengeance on Gregor Clegane. If Oberyn lost, Tyrion's blood would be spilled soon after. Tywin might even use the failure as a pretext to punish Dorne further, unraveling the betrothal. The realm stood on a knife's edge, and Aeron felt powerless to tip it either way. Come dawn, the courtyard was packed with spectators. The air felt heavy, stifling with summer heat. Tywin and Cersei observed from a raised platform, Tommen by their side, guarded by the Kingsguard. Lannister soldiers ringed the yard. Aeron stood near Arianne and other Dornish onlookers, the sun beating down on their shoulders. Oberyn Martell stepped forward, lithe and dangerous, wielding a spear tipped with deadly poison. Gregor Clegane lumbered into view, massive sword in hand, his helm hiding whatever expression he wore. The contest began. Oberyn danced around the mountain, striking quick jabs with his spear, calling out in a ringing voice about Elia Martell, demanding Gregor confess to her murder. Blow after blow, Oberyn landed telling strikes, drawing blood. The onlookers gasped and cheered at his skill. Clegane's monstrous strength began to wane under the onslaught. It seemed Oberyn would triumph, but hubris can be a fatal flaw. As Oberyn circled his wounded opponent, demanding a final confession, the mountain lashed out in a last, desperate grapple, flinging Oberyn to the ground. In a moment of brutal horror, Gregor crushed Oberyn's skull between his gauntlet hands. A collective scream tore through the courtyard. Oberyn's spear clattered away. Blood spread across the stone. The mountain collapsed as well, mortally wounded or near enough, but the damage was done. Oberyn Martell was dead. Arianne choked back a cry, tears spilling down her cheeks, as she beheld her uncle's body. Tyrion's fate was sealed. The trial by combat had ended in favor of the crown. Tywin rose, his expression granite. He declared Tyrion guilty of regicide. The sentence, death. Yet in the confusion that followed, the shock of Oberyn's death, the mountain's condition, and the chaos swirling around the Martell retinue, Tyrion vanished from his cell before the sentence could be carried out. Aeron heard the news early the next morning. Tyrion had escaped with help from an unknown accomplice. Rumors pointed to Varys the Spider. Others whispered that Jaime Lannister might have had a hand in it. No one knew for sure, but Tyrion was gone, disappeared into the depths of King's Landing or perhaps beyond. That same night, another event shook the realm. Tywin Lannister was found dead in the privy, shot with a quarrel from a crossbow. Servants discovered him slumped, eyes wide, the crossbow bolt lodged in his chest. Whispers spread that Tyrion was responsible, that he had murdered his own father in a final act of vengeance before fleeing. King's Landing woke to a new dawn. Tywin Lannister, the bulwark of the realm, was gone. Men and women alike trembled at the power vacuum left behind. Cersei wept and raged, swearing to find her brother and bring him to justice. The court flailed without Tywin's guiding hand. The city felt rudderless, adrift. Aeron struggled with grief and confusion. Tywin had been the architect of his very existence in the Red Keep, the man who had shaped him, instructed him, made him valuable in the eyes of the realm. He had feared Tywin at times, admired him at others. Now the old lion was dead. There would be no more instructions, no more careful guidance. Aeron felt the ground shifting beneath his feet, realized that everything he had known might collapse in a matter of days. Cersei was not Tywin. She lacked his discipline, his long-game cunning. Her vanity and paranoia might tear the Lannister legacy apart from within. In the turmoil, Arianne Martell and her Dornish escort prepared to return home, carrying Oberyn's body. Dorne seethed with fury at his death, blaming the Lannisters and the king. The betrothal between Aeron and Arianne hung in the balance. Prince Doran sent word that the alliance could continue, but only if justice was served for Oberyn. Yet with Tywin gone, who was left to honor any pacts? Aeron met Arianne in a small courtyard lined with lemon trees, the leaves casting dappled shadows on the flagstones. She wore a dark gown, her face pale, eyes rimmed with red from weeping. He reached for her hand. She let him take it, but her grip was tense. "I must depart with my uncle's body," she said softly. "My father demands my return. He wants to consider how best to respond to this atrocity. I do not know if I shall see King's Landing again soon or ever." He felt the finality in her voice. "What of our betrothal?" She gave a bitter laugh. "That was Tywin's design. With him gone, your new Queen Regent, Cersei, might cast me aside, or my father might do so first. But I will not forget you, Aeron Targaryen, nor will I forget our conversations about what might have been." He bowed his head, a hollowness in his chest. "I wish things were different." "So do I." She pulled him close, pressed her lips to his cheek in a gesture that was equal parts farewell and regret. "Look to the east if all else fails. The dragons may yet return to Westeros, and you have as much right as anyone to claim that legacy." He had no words as she left. Servants packed her trunks into carts, and the Dornish party slipped away through the city gates under a veil of grief and anger. Aeron watched from the ramparts until their banners were no more than specks on the horizon. In the corridors of the Red Keep, the power vacuum was palpable. Kevan Lannister attempted to steady matters, but Cersei snubbed him, desperate to hold the reins herself as Queen Regent for Tommen. She named herself head of the small council, dismissing or sidelining anyone who questioned her. Her distrust of the Martells soared, and she questioned the loyalty of every noble who had once served Tywin. Aeron, suddenly without his guardian's shield, found himself subject to pointed scrutiny. Servants began to whisper that the Targaryen boy might be a threat now that Tywin was gone. Some suggested Cersei would rid herself of him, quietly or otherwise. Yet for the moment Cersei had bigger concerns. The Tyrells pressed for Tommen's coronation and wedding to Marjorie. The Iron Bank of Bravos demanded repayment of the kingdom's massive debts. Factions across the realm stirred with discontent. The Riverlands reeled under the chaos left by the war, and the North, led by the remnants of House Stark supporters, refused to surrender. Stannis Baratheon had marched north to the Wall, fighting wildlings and forging an uneasy alliance with the Night's Watch. And across the sea, Daenerys Targaryen's name echoed louder with each passing moon. She had conquered cities in Slaver's Bay, freed slaves, and, most alarmingly, hatched 3 living dragons. Amid the storm, Aeron found himself in a precarious position. He had no father figure to guide him, no comfortable place in the new regime. Jaime Lannister was too consumed by his own guilt and responsibilities as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard to offer counsel. Tyrion had vanished, an outlaw with a price on his head. Cersei tolerated Aeron's presence so long as he remained silent and useful. He was occasionally summoned for ceremonies, displayed as the Targaryen ward of House Lannister, a bit of living symbolism of the old order bowing to the new. But it was an empty pageant, and he knew it. One night, he was summoned unexpectedly to Cersei's solar. The room smelled of sour wine. She sat behind a table littered with letters and half-finished drafts. Her green eyes, normally so proud, were bloodshot. "Sit," she commanded. Aeron did so, uneasy. A single lamp cast dancing shadows on the walls. "You have no father now," she said abruptly, swirling wine in her goblet. "Tywin is gone, and you remain an adopted whelp. Yet the Targaryen name still clings to you. Do you imagine you have a claim on this realm?" Aeron swallowed hard. "No claim, my queen. I am your loyal subject." She gave a short, humorless laugh. "Loyal subject. Yes, that's what they all say until they see a chance to grasp the crown. Perhaps Daenerys Targaryen will come with her dragons and call you cousin. Offer to make you a lord if you help her overthrow my son." He kept his voice steady. "I have never met Daenerys Targaryen. I know nothing of her plans." Cersei's gaze bored into him. "But you would have a place in them, would you not? The realm is full of fools who cling to the memory of House Targaryen. And your existence is a reminder that dragons once sat on the throne. A romantic idea for small folk and dreamers. I warn you, if I smell even a whiff of treason, I will not hesitate to cast you out. Or worse." He bowed his head, forcing humility. "I serve the crown. That is all I have ever known." She studied him, lips curling in a sneer. "Yes, you were Tywin's pet project. But Tywin is no more. Go then. Serve us well. Do nothing to earn my wrath, and you may yet keep your head." Aeron rose, heart pounding, and retreated from her presence. The threat had been unmistakable. He was on thin ice, and if Daenerys landed in Westeros, things would only grow more dangerous for him. In the weeks that followed, he kept a low profile. He spent hours in the library, poring over histories of Targaryen rule. He studied accounts of Aegon's conquest, the Dance of the Dragons, the Blackfire rebellions, searching for clues on how the realm had handled multiple dragon claimants in the past. He found no easy answers, only a litany of blood and destruction. The more he read, the less he believed that Daenerys' arrival would be a simple matter of a rightful queen retaking her throne. War would erupt anew, dragons or not. And if she discovered Aeron Targaryen, the youth who had been raised by the Lannisters, She might see him as a curiosity or a threat, depending on how she judged his loyalties. Tyrion's trial had been halted by his disappearance, but the Queen's searches continued in vain. Meanwhile, Tommen was crowned in the Great September, a subdued affair compared to Joffrey's spectacle. Margaery wed him days later, forging a new tie between the crown and House Tyrell. Aeron attended the ceremony and feasts, but they felt hollow. Tommen was a sweet boy, but clearly a puppet in Cersei's hands. The Tyrells might manipulate him from the other side. Neither faction had any love for Targaryens. They merely wanted power. Eventually, news reached King's Landing that a large fleet had been sighted crossing the Narrow Sea, rumored to bear sellswords loyal to Daenerys, or perhaps mercenaries. Reports were contradictory. Some said she had allied with the Golden Company, others insisted she had not. But the gist remained: Daenerys Targaryen was inching closer to Westeros. Cersei raged in private, forbidding any mention of it at court, but the rumors spread too quickly to be contained. The realm braced for the next wave of war. In that climate of fear, Aeron decided he could not simply remain in the Red Keep, a passive piece on a crumbling board. He needed to see for himself what was unfolding. And so, late one night, he gathered what coins he could, donned a hooded cloak, and slipped out of the castle. He headed for the docks, intent on finding a ship that might sail north or possibly to Dorne, anywhere that would offer him distance from Cersei's watchful eye. He felt a pang of guilt for leaving behind the memory of Tywin, the old man who had reared him, but Tywin's guidance was gone. The Lannisters no longer felt like protectors. They were jailers, suspicious at every turn. He managed to slip past the gold cloaks by giving a plausible lie about delivering a message to one of the harbor officials. The city at night smelled of salt and rotting fish, the moonlight glinting on black water. Tavern lights spilled out onto the quay. Sailors huddled around barrels, playing dice or sipping ale. Aeron approached a few captains, inquiring about passage. Most refused. These were troubled times, and few wanted to risk harboring a suspicious passenger with pale Targaryen hair. Aeron had tried to hide it beneath his hood, but the strands inevitably caught the moonlight. At last, he found a Braavosi captain willing to take him north, or at least as far as White Harbor. Aeron handed over enough gold to seal the deal, boarded the small cog under cover of darkness, and settled into a cramped berth. His heart hammered. He had never so blatantly disobeyed the Red Keep's unspoken rules. He was supposed to remain near the seat of power, a living token of Tywin's mastery over the old Targaryen line. Now he fled that seat, uncertain what new path awaited him. The ship set sail at dawn, slipping out from Blackwater Bay into open waters. Aeron stood at the rail, the wind lashing his face, the sun creeping above the horizon. King's Landing receded into a smudge behind them. He breathed in the brine-scented air, feeling a strange mix of dread and relief. He had broken free of Cersei's immediate grasp, but where would he go? North to Winterfell, if the rumors were true, was still ruined from the war, partially controlled by the Boltons, with scattered Stark loyalists in the hills and Wolfswood. Would they welcome a Targaryen ward, or see him as part of the southern corruption that had destroyed their lord? He had no easy answers, but the ship bore him onward, day after day, as the climate grew colder and the seas rougher. He listened to the crew's gossip. Some had heard that Stannis Baratheon held Castle Black, fighting off wildlings and White Walkers from beyond the wall. Others spoke of scattered Ironborn raids along the northern coasts. None knew or cared about a Targaryen traveler in their midst. When the cog finally reached White Harbor, Aeron disembarked with shaky legs, grateful to be on solid ground again. White Harbor was a city of pale stone, dedicated to trade and to the worship of the new gods, the largest northern port. It bustled with merchants, fishmongers, and manderly guards in green and white cloaks. Aeron spent the first night in a modest inn, warming himself by the hearth and considering his next move. He had only so much gold left, not enough to remain idle for long. He recalled that Ned Stark had once told him, "If you ever need the truth of what befell your house, what truly happened during the rebellion, you can ask." But Ned was long dead, executed by Joffrey's cruelty. Perhaps the next best thing was to speak with the man's family or allies, if any remained. Word had it that Lord Wyman Manderly, the ruler of White Harbor, was fiercely loyal to House Stark despite the North's occupation by the Boltons and their alliances with the Crown. If Aeron could find an audience with Manderly, perhaps he could glean some measure of understanding. Or if that failed, he might simply pass through, heading further north to see the Wall for himself. Part of him felt drawn to the distant boundary between life and death, where all pretenses of southern intrigue vanished in the harsh reality of ice and darkness. It proved difficult to secure an audience with Lord Manderly, who was rumored to be in negotiations with various northern lords. But fortune favored Aeron. A chance encounter with a young Manderly cousin in the city market led to an introduction. The cousin was a bright-eyed boy named Waylon, who took a shine to Aeron's Valyrian features and invited him to dine at Newcastle, seat of House Manderly. Aeron accepted, uncertain how to explain his presence but determined to try. When he arrived at the castle gates, the guards eyed him warily. He gave his name simply as Aeron, without the Targaryen label. Once inside, the boy Waylon led him through corridors hung with tapestries of merlings and fish. They passed a broad hall where knights and courtiers gathered around a roaring hearth. Lord Wyman Manderly was an immense man, aged but jovial in manner, with silver-streaked hair and a booming laugh that filled the hall. Yet beneath that joviality, Aeron sensed a keen intelligence. Manderly welcomed him with courtesy, though his gaze flicked over Aeron's face, noticing the pale hair, the refined features. In a private chamber, served a hearty meal of roast goose and freshly baked bread. Manderly addressed him. "So, Waylon here tells me you're a traveler from King's Landing. Are you a minstrel? A hedge knight? I see no sword." Aeron swallowed, weighing his words. "I was a ward in the Red Keep. I left under difficult circumstances. My name is Aeron Targaryen." Lord Wyman's eyes widened slightly, though he kept his composure. "Targaryen, you say? The last Targaryen in King's Landing was rumored to be the ward of Tywin Lannister. Are you that youth?" Aeron nodded. "Yes, my lord. Tywin raised me, or so it said. I was brought to him as an infant. With his death and the turmoil at court, I could no longer remain safely in King's Landing." A low whistle escaped Manderly's lips. "That is quite the revelation. The realm believed there were no surviving Targaryens aside from Daenerys Stormborn across the sea. Yet here you stand, flesh and blood." Waylon, sitting beside Lord Wyman, stared with open fascination. "Are you truly a dragon prince, then? Did you see Joffrey's murder? Did you see the dwarfs' battle at the feast?" Aeron managed a sad smile. "I saw far too much, I fear." Manderly's jovial demeanor slipped away, replaced by a serious mien. "You must understand, lad. The North has little love for the Lannisters or any who serve them. If news spreads that you were Tywin's ward, some might brand you an enemy. Others might see you as an avenue for vengeance. And still others might see in you a chance to restore the Targaryen line. The old Northmen remember your ancestors, for good and ill." "I understand," Aeron said quietly. "I came seeking knowledge, not power. I want to know the truth of how my house fell. Lord Eddard Stark once hinted that there was more to the tale than I'd heard. I hoped perhaps you could tell me." Manderly drummed his fingers on the table. "The truth is complicated. Aerys the Mad King brought doom upon his line with his tyranny, and Rhaegar died on the Trident. Yet not all Targaryens were villains. Many in the north considered Rhaegar an honorable prince. The war was driven by Robert Baratheon's fury over Lyanna Stark's disappearance, by the Lannisters' timely betrayal of your house, and by the realm's exhaustion with Aerys' cruelty. Tywin sacked King's Landing, presenting the corpses of Rhaegar's children to Robert as a twisted gesture of loyalty. That is the butchery that ended Targaryen rule. Many Northmen believed Robert a more just king than the Mad King, but the manner of your house's downfall was soaked in blood. Too much blood. Aeron felt a hollow ache in his chest. He had read of these events in books, gleaned bits from rumor, but hearing it stated so plainly, and seeing the regret in Manderly's eyes, made it all the more real. And Tywin was behind that sack, he said, voice subdued. Yet he saved me as an infant. Why? Manderly shrugged. Power. Perhaps he saw a tool in you, a way to keep Targaryen loyalists in check. Or perhaps he wished to use you as a symbol of his magnanimity. The man was cunning above all else. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Eventually, Manderly leaned forward, his gaze steady. What do you plan to do now, young Targaryen? Return to King's Landing and bend the knee to Cersei? Or seek out Daenerys? The realm is unsettled. Another war might be upon us if the Dragon Queen truly comes. Will you stand with her or against her? And do not think me ill-mannered for asking. It's the question all will ask when they learn who you are. Aeron realized he had no ready answer. He thought of Arianne's words, "Look to the east if all else fails." Daenerys was a distant, half-mythical figure, but she was kin, the rightful heir to a throne that House Lannister only held through conquest and cunning. But to join her would be to declare war on those who had raised him. Some small, deeply buried loyalty to Tywin balked at that. Yet Tywin was dead, and Cersei threatened him. Where else could he belong? He took a breath. I do not know, my lord. For now, I only seek to understand. The North has endured much grief. I do not wish to bring more. Manderly nodded gravely. Then stay here a while if you wish. I will not cast you out. But be warned. If word of your presence leaks, it could bring trouble from the Boltons or even from the crown. Cersei might dispatch men to seize you. Aeron accepted the risk. He spent the following weeks in White Harbor under Manderly's discreet hospitality, studying the North's culture and gleaning more details of the rebellion's history. He learned of Lyanna Stark's disappearance, Rhaegar's reputed love for her, the swirl of rumors about a secret child. He learned of the savage betrayal at the Trident, the final stand in King's Landing, and how Tywin had timed his entry to earn Robert's favor. The tapestry of war was woven with threads of heartbreak and betrayal. Meanwhile, ravens arrived from the south bearing tidings of new crises. Cersei's regency grew more erratic, the Tyrells increasingly challenged her authority, and rumor held that Daenerys Targaryen had finally set sail from Meereen, though the path of her fleet was uncertain. The Iron Islands, under newly elected King Euron Greyjoy, also looked east, dreaming of dragon horns and conquests. The entire realm seemed to hold its breath for the next storm. One chilly dawn, Aeron stood by the harbor quay, watching fishermen unload their catch, when a man in a black cloak approached. He was lean, with a lined face, and something about his bearing said he was more than a mere commoner. He nodded politely. You're the lad who calls himself Aeron. I hear you came from King's Landing. Aeron tensed. Yes, and you are? Call me Darren. I'm a traveler, too, come north looking for certain truths. I served with your father once, your father by blood, that is, or so I like to say. He was Rhaegar Targaryen, if rumors hold correct about your lineage. Aeron's pulse raced. How? Why would you say you served him? Because I was one of many men in the Crownlands who rode under his banner, the stranger said. If you'd like, I can tell you more, though not here in the open. The winds carry curious ears. Aeron weighed his options. If this man was truly a loyalist who once fought for Rhaegar, he might hold valuable insights. Or he could be a spy, sent by Cersei or others to test Aeron's loyalty. Yet curiosity proved too strong. He agreed to speak in a secluded corner of the city walls. There, amid the drifting snow, the man recounted how Rhaegar had been a prince beloved by many for his honor, his chivalry, and his skill in arms. He also confessed that some believed Rhaegar had sought to fulfill ancient prophecies, referencing the prince that was promised. We thought Rhaegar would be that prince, the man said, or perhaps his children. But the war ended those hopes, so it seemed. Aeron listened intently, heart pounding at every mention of Rhaegar, the father he had never known, the father who had died on the Trident. Did Rhaegar ever speak of me? Of a child? The man shook his head sadly. Not that I heard. Many children were rumored, but in truth, we only knew he had a son named Aegon and a daughter named Rhaenys by Elia Martell. They died in the sack. If you survived, It must have been through some quieter branch of the family or a deception. Your father might be Rhaegar, or you might be another Targaryen's get. Hard to say. That cast doubt on Aeron's entire life story. Could Tywin have lied about which Targaryen line he stemmed from? Did it matter? He bore the blood and name, and that alone had shaped his fate. If Daenerys was truly on her way, perhaps the details of Aeron's parentage would matter less than the simple fact that he carried Targaryen blood in his veins. Night settled over White Harbor, and Aeron returned to New Castle with a troubled mind. Early the next morning, Lord Manderly summoned him. There are rumors you've been seen talking to a suspicious man, one who vanished at dawn. My spies report he boarded a ship heading east, possibly to Bravos or beyond. Be careful. We do not know if he served you or meant to betray you. Aeron nodded, chastened. I understand. My lord, perhaps I should leave White Harbor soon. I do not wish to bring danger to your city. Manderly folded his hands over his ample stomach. I will not force you out, but I see the wisdom in your words. The Boltons claim dominion over the north for now. If they discover a Targaryen is here, they might attempt to curry favor with the Iron Throne by delivering you to Cersei. Best to stay on the move. Then I shall go, Aeron decided. But not south. I would rather see the Night's Watch for myself. I've heard they are neutral in all this, sworn to defend the realm from threats beyond the wall. Manderly's brows rose. Indeed they are, but the Night's Watch is in dire straits, last I heard. Wildlings massed at the wall, and Stannis Baratheon came to their aid. If you venture there, you'll find a land of uncertain loyalties. Still, it may be safer than returning to King's Landing. And so it was settled. Manderly provided him with a fresh horse, a cloak lined with fur for the cold, and a letter of passage that might ease tensions at certain northern holdfasts. Aeron departed White Harbor at dawn, grateful for the Manderly's kindness and weighed down by more questions than answers. The road north was long and harsh. Freezing winds whipped across the plains, and the nights were bitter. He passed scattered villages, where reeking huts clustered around half-frozen streams. Sometimes he'd see a roving band of armed men, either free riders or remnants of Bolton patrols, and he would hide until they passed. After weeks of travel, he reached the Gift, the stretch of land that belonged to the Night's Watch, though few small folk remained to farm it. Farms stood abandoned, fields choked by weeds. Autumn was waning, winter's breath creeping closer. The sky pressed gray and cold. Aeron's horse trudged onward until the black wall of Castle Black loomed in the distance, a dark silhouette against the snowy horizon. In the courtyard, black-clad brothers hurried about their duties. The walls were soot-stained from old fires. He learned that Lord Commander Mormont was dead, replaced by a new Lord Commander, Jon Snow. The name rang in Aeron's mind, Ned Stark's bastard, the boy who had once hovered at the periphery of Winterfell's halls. Now he was Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. The realm had changed indeed. Aeron was met by a watchful man named Dolorous Ed, who regarded him with dry humor. We've enough troubles here, but you're welcome if you wish to join the Watch. We're always in need of new recruits who don't mind freezing and fighting whites. Aeron shook his head. I'm not here to join. I only seek a place to think, and perhaps speak with your new Lord Commander. Dolorous Ed snorted. He's a busy man, but I'll take you to him. Don't cause trouble, or you'll find yourself ranging beyond the wall quicker than you can say, I yield. He led Aeron to the common hall, where men in black cloaks huddled around a long trestle table, warming themselves with stew. At the head of the table stood Jon Snow, dark-haired, gray-eyed, wearing the mantle of command with quiet gravity. He looked up as Aeron approached, frowning slightly. Who's this? He asked Ed. A traveler says he wants to talk. Calls himself Aeron. Jon studied Aeron, and recognition flickered in his eyes. I've seen you before. In Winterfell years ago. You were with Lord Tywin, though you had hair like... He paused. You were the Targaryen ward. Aeron inclined his head. Yes, Lord Commander. Jon's expression hardened. We are no lords here. Only the Night's Watch. What brings you to Castle Black? Aeron took a breath. I left King's Landing after Tywin died and Joffrey was murdered. I sought the truth of my heritage, but found only confusion. The realm bristles for another war if Daenerys crosses the narrow sea. I have no desire to be caught in the middle again. Jon Snow regarded him solemnly. We have bigger concerns than who sits the throne. The long night creeps closer. White walkers stir beyond the wall. Wildlings have come south in hordes. Stannis Baratheon is encamped not far from here, calling himself the rightful king. If you've come for refuge, you might find it for a time, but the war here is not the same as the one in the south. Aeron nodded. I understand. I only ask for the chance to remain here quietly. Perhaps I can help in some small way. I have some skill at arms and knowledge of the court. Jon studied him. The Watch has no involvement in the realm's politics. We protect the realm from the threats beyond. If you can accept that, then you may stay, but don't expect us to champion your cause or hide you from your enemies if they come knocking. I understand, Aeron said, relief mingling with apprehension. At least here, high atop the world, Cersei's grasp might not reach so quickly. Perhaps he could think, away from the swirl of southern courts. Jon offered a curt nod. Very well, we'll find a place for you, but keep your Targaryen name quiet. Some of the Watch might not take kindly to it, or might see advantage in selling you out to a southern lord. Aeron lowered his eyes. As you say. So Aeron settled into the bleak life of Castle Black. He helped with chores, mended clothes, and occasionally sparred with the recruits in the yard. He could see the strain on the men's faces. They had weathered attacks from wildlings, and rumors persisted of others, white-skinned nightmares lurking in the icy wastes. Winter was coming, and the supply lines were tenuous. Stannis' presence added to the tension. The Baratheon forces occupied part of the fortress, pushing a claim to the Iron Throne in distant King's Landing. Aeron wondered what might happen if Stannis discovered him. Would he be offered up as a means to delegitimize Cersei? Or might Stannis see him as a threat to his own claim? He managed to avoid the Baratheon camp, though he caught glimpses of the king when walking along the parapets. Stannis was tall, balding, perpetually grim, with eyes that burned with fervent purpose. He had a red priestess by his side, Melisandre of Ass High, who was said to wield strange magic. On more than one occasion, Aeron felt a prickle on his skin when he passed near her in the courtyard, as if she sensed something in him, the old Valyrian blood, perhaps. He kept his distance, not wishing to attract her attention. The days stretched into weeks. Aeron grew accustomed to the ceaseless cold, the watchtowers, the dire ravens swirling overhead. He found a strange solace in the fortress's austerity, far removed from the perfumed intrigues of the Red Keep. Jon Snow, though burdened by command, occasionally found a moment to speak with him. They talked of the past, of how Ned Stark had tried to spare bloodshed wherever possible, how the North had paid dearly in the war. When Aeron asked if Ned had ever spoken about the Targaryens, Jon only shook his head. He never spoke much of Robert's rebellion to me. What I know, I gleaned from rumors. My father was an honorable man, but some truths he kept locked away. Aeron felt that same pang of regret. So many mysteries, so few answers. At least here, the immediate threat of Lannister daggers seemed distant. Yet, on a bleak morning, Aeron's fragile sense of safety cracked. A group of mounted knights approached Castle Black under a banner of gold and crimson. Lannisters. Aeron spied them from atop the wall and felt his chest tighten. Had Cersei dispatched men to hunt him down? Or was there some other business? He rushed to find Jon Snow, who stood with the Black brothers at the castle gate. The Lannister envoy demanded entry, presenting letters that gave them the right to travel freely in the north under the king's name, meaning Tommen's name. Jon had no legal ground to deny them, and so they rode into the courtyard. The leader of the band was Ser Balman Swyft, a minor lordling allied to the Lannisters. He announced that they had come to treat with King Stannis. Aeron lingered in the shadows, cloak drawn, heart pounding. If they recognized him, it could all be over. He heard snatches of conversation, the Lannister riders seeking to broker a truce or at least some arrangement with Stannis. They claimed that Cersei would consider recognition of Stannis' holding in the north if he would in turn renounce his claim to the Iron Throne and accept Tommen as king. Stannis, proud and unyielding, was unlikely to bend the knee. The watchers on the battlements muttered that war might erupt right here, within the walls. But the real question for Aeron was whether these Lannister knights carried orders to find and detain the Targaryen ward. For 2 tense days, they remained at the fortress, meeting with Stannis' men in corner rooms, presumably bargaining. Aeron kept his head down, avoiding the main halls, sleeping in the library or the rookery to stay out of sight. His heart fluttered every time he heard footsteps in the corridor, but it seemed no one recognized him or sought him out. On the 3rd day, the Lannister party departed, having achieved nothing. Aeron watched them leave from a narrow slit in the castle wall, relief washing over him like a weak sunbeam in winter. He realized he could not remain at Castle Black indefinitely. The more the realm's factions roamed north, the likelier it was that word of his whereabouts would leak. And if Daenerys truly landed in Westeros, the north might become a battleground as well. One final notion came to him. If he wished answers, perhaps he should pursue Daenerys directly. If she arrived in the east, maybe he could reach her by sailing from Eastwatch by the sea or from a port in the Vale. It was a risk, but everything was a risk. At least meeting Daenerys face to face might clarify who he was in the eyes of the true Targaryen heir, if she even recognized him as kin. He confessed his plan to Jon Snow on a cold evening, the two standing on the windswept wall, gazing across the haunted forest. Jon wore a heavy cloak of black wool, snow clinging to his dark curls. He frowned. It's a dangerous course. The seas are treacherous, and if Daenerys does come to Westeros, she may bring fire and blood. She might not welcome a Lannister-raised Targaryen, or she might see you as a rival. I've considered that, Aeron said quietly, but I have no place in King's Landing, no place here. Dorne is closed to me now that Oberyn is dead and Arianne has returned, uncertain of our betrothal. The north is hardly safe with the Boltons about, so I must try. Jon exhaled a cloud of white breath. Then I won't stop you. The Night's Watch is neutral, and you have no oath to us. If you can slip past Stannis' lines and cross the mountains to the Vale, you might find a port that will take you across the narrow sea. Or perhaps sail from Eastwatch. But be warned, I hear the Vale is under the protection of Lord Peter Baelish, who is dangerous in his own way. Aeron nodded, bracing himself. Thank you for your hospitality, Lord Commander. I'll depart in a day or so quietly. When that time came, Aeron saddled his horse, packed scant supplies, and took his leave. Jon watched from the courtyard, offering a grim smile. Safe travels, he said. And if ever the wall truly needs you, should the long night come, remember what you've seen here. I will, Aeron promised, clasping Jon's forearm in farewell. Then he rode out into the crisp northern air, heading east, toward the Vale. His path was lonely, the roads often blocked by ice or patrolled by wandering soldiers loyal to the Boltons. More than once, he had to backtrack to avoid suspicious men. But eventually he found the mountain passes that led into the Vale, guided by old travelers' tales and a handful of crude maps. The Vale was breathtaking in winter's approach. Soaring peaks crowned with snow, valleys where waterfalls froze into glittering sculptures. He navigated precarious trails until he reached the Gates of the Moon, a castle at the foot of the giant peak that housed the Eyrie. Peter Baelish, now Lord Protector of the Vale, resided there with Lady Lisa Arryn's son, the sickly boy Robert Arryn. Rumor said Lisa was dead, having fallen from the moon door. If Baelish recognized Arryn, who could say what plots might unfold? Yet to reach a port that could bear him across the sea, Arryn had little choice but to pass through. The narrow roads that skirted the Vale eventually wound down to Gulltown, the largest port. Quietly, he made his way to the Gates of the Moon, hoping only to slip by. But fortune was fickle. No sooner had he arrived than guards questioned him at the gatehouse. He tried to pass himself off as a simple traveler. His cloak and worn appearance made the deception plausible. However, Baelish's men were famously suspicious, and they took him to meet the Lord Protector, just to be sure. Aaron was led into a modest solar. Peter Baelish, slender and sharp-featured, lounged by a table of parchments, wearing a subtle smirk. He rose when Aaron was brought in, eyes alight with curiosity. "A weary traveler from the north?" he inquired. "My men said you are alone, no family name offered." Aaron bowed stiffly. "I've no name worth mentioning, my lord. I come seeking passage to Gulltown." Peter's smile sharpened. "No name? Now that's suspicious. Men with no name are often men with secrets. And I do love secrets. Might it be that you're the Targaryen ward once prized by Tywin Lannister? I recall hearing about you." "Aaron, was it not?" Aaron's stomach lurched. He managed a composed nod. "A name known to some, it seems. And you fled the capital after Tywin's death, yes? All the realm is abuzz with talk of where you might have gone, though Cersei seems preoccupied with her own conspiracies." Peter's gaze gleamed with amusement. "So now you appear at my door, seeking a ship to who knows where. I can hazard a guess. Perhaps you wish to sail to Essos, to find that other Targaryen rumored to be raising an army?" Aaron exhaled slowly. "I came only to pass through, my lord. I am no threat to you or the Vale." Peter's lips curved. "Oh, I'm not threatened. Intrigued, rather. You see, knowledge is power, and the knowledge that I hold the missing Targaryen ward in my hands is quite valuable. I could send a raven to King's Landing, or I could keep your presence hidden. I wonder which choice is more profitable." He steepled his fingers. "Unless you can offer me something more appealing." Aaron resisted a shudder. "I have no gold, no influence. The Lannisters would pay you, I'm sure. But perhaps the Targaryens would pay more if Daenerys arrives," Peter mused. "And the Martells might also pay, for they have old ties to your house. So many possibilities. Fortunate for you, I am a patient man. You wish a ship from Gulltown? I can arrange that with a snap of my fingers." "And in return?" Aaron asked warily. Peter gave a soft laugh. "In return, I would have your goodwill. When the day comes, and it will come soon, when the realm is torn between Cersei, Daenerys, the Tyrells, and every other shark, I might call on you for a favor. Perhaps I will ask you to speak for me to Daenerys, or to the Martells, or some other rising power, smoothing my way into whichever circle emerges victorious. In short, I will sponsor your departure now, if you keep your ear open for my advantage later. Do we have a deal?" Aaron felt a surge of distaste at the man's naked opportunism. But the alternative was being delivered to Cersei or left stranded in the Vale. He forced a small nod. "We have a deal, my lord." "Excellent." Peter's tone was breezy. "You shall have passage to Gulltown, and from there to whatever port you desire. Let us say you owe me a kindness in the future, if circumstances allow." That same afternoon, Baelish made good on his word, dispatching Aaron with a small escort of Vale guards to Gulltown. No mention was made of collecting a ransom. It was as if Peter thought the future payoff would be far greater than any immediate sum. Aaron left the gates of the moon behind, unsettled by the sense that he had made a bargain with a fox. Yet it was a step closer to the sea. In Gulltown, he sold his horse and used the coin to secure passage on a Braavosi merchantman that would cross the narrow sea to Pentos. Once again, he found himself on deck, the salt wind in his face. This time, though, the gulls cried overhead and the gullies of the Vale receded behind him. He set his sights east, heart pounding at the enormity of what he was about to attempt. If Daenerys Targaryen was truly in Essos, perhaps in Pentos or still traveling from Meereen, then he might soon stand before the Mother of Dragons, the last scion of the dynasty from which he drew his name. Would she see him as an ally? A curiosity? A threat? He could only guess. Still, as the ship plowed through the wave, Aaron felt the sting of excitement amid the fear. He had grown up in the shadow of Tywin Lannister, taught to hide his true feelings behind courtesy and cunning. Now he was free of that shadow, forging his own path, albeit a dangerous one. Thoughts of Arianne Martell surfaced now and then, her suggestion that he look east. Thoughts of Tyrion vanished into the unknown. Thoughts of Oberyn Martell's dying roar. Thoughts of Ned Stark's grave kindness. All of it swirled in his mind as he braced himself against the ship's rail, watching the horizon for the first glimpse of the lands beyond the sea. Days turned to weeks on the voyage, the sea at times placid, at times raging with storms. The Braavosi captain, a tall man with a braided beard, spoke of Pentos as a city of indulgent magisters who vied for power behind lavish parties. Aeron listened quietly, gleaning what he could about the political climate. Rumors abounded that Illyrio Mopatis, a wealthy magister of Pentos, had once sheltered Daenerys and her brother Viserys, fueling their hopes of reclaiming the Iron Throne. That was years ago, but perhaps Mopatis still had ties to Daenerys or her supporters. When the merchantman finally docked at the port of Pentos, Aeron stepped onto foreign soil for the first time in his life. The air was warmer, heavy with spices and exotic perfumes. Golden domes and marble facades glittered in the sun. Pentoshi merchants bustled about in fine silks, their servants carrying baskets of fruit, jars of aromatic oils, and casks of wine. The city was vibrant in a way Westeros never was. Yet beneath that vibrancy lurked the same power plays and deceit he had come to expect. He rented a small room in a modest inn by the quays, then set out to learn what he could. Speaking the common tongue in a place where Valyrian dialects were prevalent marked him as Westerosi. Yet few gave him trouble. Pentos was used to travelers from every corner of the known world. He heard rumors that Illyrio Mopatis had close ties to Daenerys, that he might even be expecting her return. Others claimed Daenerys was still far south, in Meereen, contending with rebellious slave masters. No one seemed certain if or when she would sail for Westeros. Aeron debated whether to approach Illyrio directly. The risk was immense. If Illyrio was indeed a Targaryen loyalist, might he greet Aeron as a nephew of sorts, or would he cast him out as a Lannister creation? In the end, Aeron concluded that if he truly sought Daenerys, Illyrio might be the best link. And so, on a day when the sun hung high in a cloudless sky, Aeron made his way to Illyrio's manse, a grand estate with thick walls, gilded gates, and luscious gardens. At the gate, two unsmiling servants in Pentoshi garb barred his way. He asked for an audience with Magister Illyrio, claiming important information about the Targaryen cause. He was made to wait under a shaded colonnade, where peacocks strutted among marble pillars. After an hour, the servants returned, leading him through winding corridors into a lavish hall of patterned tiles and pungent incense. There, seated on a cushioned divan, was Illyrio Mopatis, a large man with bristling mustachios, bejeweled rings on every finger, and robes of orange silk. He beckoned Aeron closer, a curious gleam in his eyes. "I am told you claim Targaryen blood," Illyrio said in a voice that rolled like warm honey. "Yet you bear no silver hair that I can see, only a pale gold, half hidden by your hood." Aeron pushed back the hood, letting his near-white locks catch the light. "I was raised in Westeros by Tywin Lannister, though I was born of Targaryen lineage. I have come seeking Daenerys Targaryen." Illyrio's round face betrayed a flicker of surprise. "Raised by Tywin? That is unexpected. We heard no rumor that Tywin spared any Targaryen babes aside from those rumored across the sea. Who exactly are you?" Aeron recounted the tale as best he could. How a babe had been brought to Tywin, how Tywin raised him as a ward, how Robert allowed it for political reasons. He spoke of his uneasy life in King's Landing, of Tywin's manipulations, of his flight from court after Joffrey's murder and Tywin's death. Illyrio listened, stroking the ends of his mustachios, occasionally nodding or smiling. When Aeron finished, silence hung thick. At length Illyrio said, "Fascinating. You are living proof that House Targaryen's seeds were not entirely extirpated by the usurper. Yet your father's identity remains uncertain. You might be Rhaegar's Get, or a cousin's child. Either way, your blood is pure enough to matter. I see now why Tywin might have kept you, useful leverage, should any Targaryen loyalists reemerge." Aeron shifted. "You once harbored Daenerys, did you not? Is she here in Pentos?" Illyrio sighed. "Alas, she is not. She remains in Meereen, last I heard, ruling as a queen over freedmen and warring with the slave masters. She has 3 dragons, and half the world trembles at their mention. But does she plan to invade Westeros? That is less clear. Her counselors favor it, some say, but she faces challenges in Slaver's Bay. I have tried sending messages, urging her to recall her birthright. Perhaps soon she will heed the call. Aeron's heart hammered. So Daenerys was still across the sea, entangled in the complexities of Slaver's Bay. Can you arrange passage for me to Meereen? Or at least somewhere near it? Illyrio's eyes narrowed. You wish to stand before Daenerys Stormborn, proclaim yourself Targaryen, and what exactly? Join her court? Offer your sword? Or your cunning, gleaned from Tywin's tutelage? She might be intrigued, or she might see you as a Lannister spy. Aeron dipped his head. I realize the risk, but I have nowhere else to turn. If she intends to cross into Westeros, I would stand at her side. Or if she condemns me, at least I'll have the truth. A slow smile curved Illyrio's lips. A bold ambition. Perhaps I can aid you. I have ships at my disposal, and contacts in Volantis who trade near Slaver's Bay. But such a venture costs coin, and I must be sure it will not offend Daenerys or bring me trouble. You are an unknown, after all. Aeron felt a stab of familiar frustration. Everyone, from Baelish to Illyrio, wanted something in exchange. What do you ask of me, then? Illyrio's many rings glimmered as he tapped his fingers on a side table. Only that you do not forget the generosity of Illyrio Mopatis when you stand before the Mother of Dragons. Remind her of who helped you come to her. Speak well of me if the time is right. That is a small price, yes. Aeron nodded, understanding the game. He was no stranger to bargains. You have my word. Then we are agreed. Illyrio clapped his hands, summoning servants. You shall stay in my manse as my guest. In a few days, I will arrange a ship to carry you to Volantis, where you can make your way to Meereen, if the port is open. Mind you, it is a war-torn region, so do not expect easy passage. Relief and trepidation warred in Aeron's chest. He was actually on the verge of journeying to meet Daenerys Targaryen, the living embodiment of his house's legacy, the same young queen who commanded dragons. He thanked Illyrio, bowing low, and followed the servants to a sumptuous guest suite. That evening, he dined on spiced meats and honey wine, a feast that seemed decadent after the harsh fare of the north. His mind spun with possibility. At last, he was taking control of his fate. Over the next days, Illyrio entertained him lavishly, introducing him to Pentoshi nobles at sumptuous feasts. Aeron played the role of a polite Westerosi traveler, though some must have guessed more. He overheard hushed inquiries about the boy with Targaryen hair. Gossip circulated quickly, but in Pentos's labyrinth of secrets, one more rumor was hardly cause for alarm. Finally, Illyrio announced the ship was ready. It was a 3-masted galley named Sun's Mercy, captained by a Volantene named Marco. Aeron boarded at dawn, exchanging bows with Illyrio, who waved a perfumed handkerchief from the quay. The last words Illyrio said to him, "Remember your promise. Speak well of me to Daenerys. We have much to gain when she claims her throne." Aeron nodded, uncertain if that day would ever come. But the lines were cast off, and the Sun's Mercy glided away from the dock, sails snapping in the brisk sea wind. The voyage south along Essos's coastline took weeks, with stops at trading outposts and small freeports. Aeron spent long hours at the bow, gazing across the turquoise water, the horizon shimmering like liquid silver. Occasionally, they'd pass slave ships or war galleys rumored to belong to the Yunkish or Meereenese factions, each bristling with soldiers. News from those vessels was grim. Slaver's Bay had become a cauldron of conflict. Daenerys had halted the fighting for a time, but rebellious masters and foreign armies continued to threaten her rule. When at last the Sun's Mercy approached Volantis, Aeron beheld the ancient city's massive black walls, the long bridges spanning the river, the tiger and elephant factions vying for dominion. Smoke rose from countless fires in the sprawling metropolis. The captain declared they would take on fresh water and supplies, then proceed further east if conditions permitted. But rumors reached them on the docks of Volantis that Tyrion Lannister, long missing from Westeros, had passed through not so long ago, traveling in the direction of Meereen. The idea that Tyrion might also seek Daenerys was a startling revelation. Aeron asked around discreetly, but the answers were vague. Some said Tyrion had been abducted by slavers, others that he had joined a dwarf troop, or that he accompanied a false Targaryen known as Young Griff. Confusion reigned. A few days later, with fresh supplies loaded, the Sun's Mercy continued onward, hugging the coast. At each port, caution was required. The wars in Slavers' Bay had made the waters treacherous. Pirate galleys lurked, mercenary fleets roamed. Yet somehow the Sun's Mercy persevered. Eventually they came within sight of Meereen's skyline, a city of pyramids that rose above desert plains. Warships cruised the harbor. The city walls bristled with scorpions and catapults. The banners of the Dragon Queen, a three-headed dragon on black, were said to fly above the Great Pyramid. But the city was hardly peaceful. Battles had scorched the surrounding fields. A siege had recently been broken, but tension remained high. Marco, the Volantene captain, was reluctant to sail into the harbor. "We could be seized by Yunkish or Meereenese forces. They pay well for ships. Or Daenerys's new rulers might not allow strangers to dock freely." Yet he had promised Illyrio to deliver Aeron as close as possible. At length, he decided they would anchor offshore, and Aeron could hire a small skiff to row him to the Meereenese docks. The plan was risky. Aeron might be arrested or turned away, but he had come too far to retreat now. Under a blazing sun, wearing simple traveling garments and a sword at his hip, Aeron climbed down into a small boat rowed by a pair of local oarsmen. The water glittered blue and gold. He gazed at Meereen's towering walls, each pyramid crowned with braziers that belched black smoke. Drawing nearer, he saw battered sections of the walls still showing signs of assault, scorch marks and broken siege engines left to rot. The harbor was full of ships bearing diverse flags, the remnants of an uneasy truce, perhaps. Slaves and freedmen bustled on the docks, some brandishing tattoos of broken chains upon their cheeks. Aeron's skiff found a berth at a half-ruined dock. He paid the oarsman, who promptly rowed away, leaving him alone among throngs of Meereenese wearing colorful robes or rough-spun clothes. The heat was oppressive, the air thick with the smell of sweat, spices, and blood. He could sense the tension. Freedmen looked at the old master class with suspicion, while those loyal to the old ways spat at mention of the Targaryen queen. Soldiers patrolled in mismatched armor, some bearing the sigil of a three-headed dragon, others wearing the stripes of Sellsword companies. Steeling himself, Aeron made inquiries carefully at first. He learned that Daenerys had wed a Meereenese noble named Hisdar zo Lorak to bring peace, but the arrangement was fraught. Rebellions flared, a plague called the Pale Mare had swept through the camps, and the queen's dragons had grown restless. Yet rumors said Daenerys was alive, though some claimed she had flown off on the back of Drogon, her largest dragon, after a pit fight gone awry. The city was now partially ruled by her council, unsure when or if she would return. The labyrinth of contradictory stories made Aeron's head spin. Eventually, he found a group of Unsullied, eunuch soldiers, stoic and disciplined, wearing the Dragon Queen's banner. He approached their officer, explaining he was a Westerosi traveler who had come to pledge himself to Daenerys Targaryen. The Unsullied stared with blank expressions, uncertain if that was reason enough to grant an audience. But Aeron's pale hair and mention of Valyrian blood piqued their interest. They led him through dusty streets, past crumbling mansions and ragged crowds, up to the Great Pyramid itself. There, in a vast antechamber, he was told to wait. The wait stretched for hours. Night fell, torches lit the halls. Nearby, armed Meereenese men eyed him suspiciously, whispering among themselves. Finally, a tall man with dark skin and a shaved head arrived. He introduced himself as Grey Worm, commander of the Unsullied. His manner was polite but wary. "You say you are Targaryen, yes?" Aeron inclined his head. "I was raised under that name. I carry the blood. I came from Westeros, from King's Landing originally, to speak with the Queen." Grey Worm shook his head. "The Queen is not here. She is gone. Some say she is in the wild with Drogon, but we do not know. Her husband, Hisdar, was dethroned by those who doubt his loyalty. We keep the peace with her counselors, but they do not rule with her authority. It is complicated. Disappointment flooded Aeron. He had traveled across half the world, only to find that Daenerys herself had vanished. Then I must wait, he said quietly. Wait for her return. Grey Worm studied him. You may remain in the city if you cause no trouble, but do not expect an easy welcome. We have fought many enemies. If you come with ill intent, you will be dealt with. I understand, Aeron replied. I mean no harm, only loyalty if she will have it. Grey Worm hesitated, then gave a curt nod. Then you may stay. There are quarters below for those who pledge to the Queen. But your fate is uncertain, as is ours. And so Aeron Targaryen found himself in a foreign city, the seat of a queen who was absent, torn by internal strife and external threats. He had fled the Lannisters, the threat of Cersei, and the memory of Tywin, only to land in the midst of another swirling vortex of power. Day after day, he walked the bazaars, saw the countless freedmen who called Daenerys Mysa, heard conflicting accounts of her mercy and her wrath. He explored the old fighting pits, still stained with dried blood. He visited the harbor, where sellswords and merchants argued over trade deals and the future of Meereen. Yet Daenerys did not return. Rumors circulated that she had been spotted in the Dothraki Sea, captured or embraced by another Khalasar. Some said she had died. Others believed she would return at the head of a new Khalasar, unstoppable. Meanwhile, the Yunkai threatened to renew their siege. Tensions flared among the great masters and the freedmen. Aeron sensed that if Daenerys delayed too long, her fragile hold might shatter. Amid this uncertainty, Aeron's life settled into a strange routine. He sparred with some of the Unsullied, who respected his skill with a blade. He traded stories with Meereenese freedmen who yearned for the Queen's return. Occasionally, he saw men claiming to represent the Golden Company or other sellsword factions, each with their own agenda. He heard mention of a young Griff, who also claimed Targaryen blood, rumored to be sailing for Westeros. The notion that there might be yet another Targaryen pretender baffled Aeron. Had Tywin known of such a boy? Weeks turned into months. Still no queen returned. The city limped on under the precarious leadership of her council. Some days, Aeron stood atop the Great Pyramid's terraces, staring out over the desert, wondering if a dragon's silhouette might appear against the setting sun. The longer he waited, the more a quiet desperation grew in him. He had risked everything to find Daenerys, believing she alone could anchor his uncertain identity. But she was absent, possibly lost to the Dothraki Sea. If she never came back, what then? He confided these worries in Grey Worm, who said with typical succinctness, "We do our duty. The Queen said she would return. We believe, or we perish. There is no other way." One scorching afternoon, a caravan arrived from the south with news that Daenerys lived, seen riding a dragon alongside a massive Dothraki Khalasar. She was rumored to be forging an alliance with the Dothraki to retake Meereen and then sail for Westeros. The city erupted with talk and excitement. Freedmen held onto hope. The old masters trembled. Sellswords began to position themselves for the return of the Mother of Dragons. Aeron felt his heart leap. Perhaps everything he had endured might finally come to fruition. Indeed, a few weeks later, distant horns echoed across the desert. A swirl of dust rose on the horizon. Aeron stood with Grey Worm and others atop the Great Pyramid, gazing out. The silhouette of a great black dragon soared above the approaching columns of horsemen. Daenerys Targaryen, the Unburnt, was returning. It was like beholding a living myth. Drogon's mighty wings blotting out the sun, a legion of Dothraki riders stretching across the sands. The gates opened to a thunderous arrival. Aeron watched as Daenerys, clad in a flowing dress that accentuated her Valyrian features, rode through the city on a white horse, Drogon circling overhead. The freedmen cheered, chanting Mysa. The Dothraki roared war cries. The old masters cowered behind shuttered windows. At the foot of the Great Pyramid, Daenerys dismounted, greeting Grey Worm and her other commanders. There was an air of triumph, tempered by the knowledge that Meereen was fragile and the threat of enemies lingered just beyond. Aeron stood among the assembled freedmen and soldiers, waiting for a chance to step forward. At last, the queen's violet eyes scanned the crowd. He pushed his way forward, heart hammering. Her gaze fixed on him, noticing the pale hair, the aristocratic features reminiscent of old Valyria. He fell to one knee, bowing his head. "Your Grace," he began, voice trembling slightly. "I am Aeron Targaryen, raised in Westeros under Tywin Lannister, but come here to pledge myself to you." A hush rippled around them. Daenerys's expression was impossible to read, a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "Another Targaryen?" she asked softly. "I have heard rumors. Rise, and let me see your face." He stood, meeting her gaze. She studied him for a long moment, perhaps noting the shape of his eyes, the set of his jaw. The hush deepened. Drogon glided overhead, casting an ominous shadow across the plaza. "If you were raised by Tywin Lannister, how is it you bear the Targaryen name?" she asked. Aeron explained, voice shaking with earnest emotion. He spoke of being brought to Tywin as a babe, of living under the lion's tutelage, of his flight after Tywin's death. He spoke of traveling to the north to Essos, risking Everett.